My son kicked open my front door and screamed in my face, demanding his $3 million inheritance while I was still alive and sitting right in front of him. I looked him in the eye, smiled calmly, and handed him a thick manila envelope. He tore it open, his hands shaking with greed, expecting a check that would solve all his gambling debts and fund his lavish lifestyle. Instead, he found a single receipt, a receipt that made his knees buckle and his face turn the color of ash. Before I tell you what was on that paper and how I destroyed his world in 5 seconds, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful child a lesson they will never forget. My name is Enoch Freeman. I am 68 years old. To the world, and specifically to my son Jerome, I am just a retired mechanic living in a run-down wooden house in a forgotten neighborhood of Atlanta. I have grease under my fingernails and I drive a truck that coughs smoke. What they do not know is that I own the logistics company that moves freight across 3 states. I own the warehouses. I own the land. But I learned a long time ago that silence is power and flashing money only attracts parasites. Unfortunately, I raised one. I was sitting in my favorite leather armchair, the one with the cracked upholstery that molds perfectly to my back. The afternoon sun was slicing through the dust motes dancing in the air. It was quiet. I cherished the quiet. I was carefully polishing the brass valve of an antique carburetor with a rag dipped in oil. It is meditative work. It requires patience, a steady hand, and respect for how things work. Qualities my son never possessed. The silence did not just break. It was murdered. The front door slammed against the wall with such violence that the family photos on the mantel rattled. The wood frame splintered. I did not jump. I did not look up. I kept my eyes on this brass valve, rubbing a circle of oil into the metal. Jerome stormed in like a hurricane of cheap cologne and bad decisions. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, but it fit him poorly because he lacked the posture of a man who earned it. Behind him was Courtney, his wife. She stepped over the threshold as if she were walking into a sewer. She was wearing white stilettos in a house with pine floorboards that I oiled myself. She wrinkled her nose, waving a hand in front of her face as if the smell of honest work was toxic fumes. "Old man, are you deaf?" Jerome shouted. His voice cracked. It was the sound of desperation masked as arrogance. I continued to polish the valve. 1 circle, 2 circles. Jerome marched over and kicked the coffee table. My cup of black coffee wobbled but did not spill. "I am talking to you," he screamed, looming over me. I finally stopped my hand. I looked up. I saw a 32-year-old man who still looked like the toddler who used to throw tantrums in the candy aisle. But now the tantrum was dangerous. His eyes were bloodshot. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. "Hello, Jerome," I said. My voice was low. Gravel and earth. "Hello, Courtney. You broke my door latch." Courtney let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "The door latch," she mocked. "That is what you are worried about. This whole house is a tear-down Enoch. It smells like gasoline and old people. I do not know how you live like this. It is embarrassing. We did not come here to talk about your garbage house," Jerome interrupted, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. "We came for what is mine." I set the carburetor down on the rag. I wiped my hands slowly, finger by finger. "What is yours?" I asked calmly. "My inheritance." Jerome spat the word out. "The money Mom supposedly left. The money you have been hoarding in those retirement accounts while I am out here trying to build an empire. I know you have it. I know you have at least 3 million liquid." I looked at him. An empire. He called his pyramid schemes and crypto scams an empire. He had never worked a day of hard labor in his life. I paid for his college. He dropped out. I paid for his first business. He drank it away. "You are not dead yet," Courtney added, crossing her arms. "But you might as well be. Look at you. You sit here in the dark polishing trash. You are useless to society. You are useless to us. Why hold on to the money until you die? Give it to Jerome now. We have an opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime investment." "It is crypto, isn't it?" I asked. Jerome's face twisted. "You would not understand, old man. You are a dinosaur. You think money comes from sweating in a garage. The world has changed. I am going to be a billionaire. I just need the seed capital. 3 million. That is all." 3 million, I repeated. "Yes," he shouted. "Stop playing stupid. I know you have it. I know you sold that land in Savannah years ago. I did the math. Give it to me." Now, or so help me God, I will have you declared incompetent and take it anyway." Courtney stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. She looked at my oil-stained shirt with pure disgust. "Think about it, Enoch," she hissed. "You are alone. You are frail. If we stop visiting, who will find you when you have a heart attack? The rats. Give Jerome the money. Go to a nice nursing home. We will even pick one out for you, one of the cheap ones since you love saving money so much." They stood there panting, waiting for me to break. They expected the old mechanic to tremble. They expected me to beg for their affection. They expected fear, but they forgot who raised them. They forgot that before I was a mechanic, before I was a businessman, I was a man who survived the streets of Atlanta when they were burning. I looked at Jerome. I saw the fear behind his anger. I saw the shadow of the loan shark standing behind him, though they were not in the room. He needed that money today. Not for an investment, for his life. I stood up. My knees popped loudly in the quiet room. I towered over him. I am not a tall man, but I carry a weight that makes people step back. Jerome took a half step back, his courage faltering for a second. "You want your inheritance?" I asked. "Yes," he breathed. "You want the $3 million you believe you are owed?" "Yes, Dad." "Give it to me." I nodded slowly. I reached into the pocket of my grease-stained work pants. I pulled out a key. I walked over to the old oak desk in the corner, the one covered in unpaid utility bills I kept there for show. I unlocked the bottom drawer. Jerome and Courtney watched me like hungry wolves watching a limping deer. I could hear their breathing. I could smell their greed. It smelled like rot. I pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. It was sealed with red tape. I walked back to them and held it out. "Here," I said. Jerome snatched it from my hand so fast he almost gave me a paper cut. He was shaking. He ripped the tape. He tore the top of the envelope. He was expecting a cashier's check. He was expecting the deed to the land. He was expecting his salvation. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of papers. But they were not checks. They were invoices. Old crinkled receipts, police reports, court documents. He froze. He stared at the top paper. "What is this?" he whispered. "Read it," I said. "Read it out loud." His voice trembled. "Fulton County Jail. Bail bond. $50,000. Date November 12th, 2015. "Keep reading," I commanded. He flipped the page. "Settlement agreement. Civil suit. Car accident. $120,000. Date July 4th, 2018. Courtney snatched the papers from him. She flipped through them frantically. There were receipts for private school tuition. Receipts for rehab clinics. Receipts for lawyer's fees when he got caught holding drugs. Receipts for the damage he did to his first apartment. I stepped closer to them. "I kept every receipt, Jerome. Every single time you messed up, and I paid to clean it up. Every time you crashed a car. Every time you got arrested. Every time you needed a fresh start. I wrote it down. I calculated the inflation. I calculated the interest you would have paid to a bank." I pointed a calloused finger at the bottom of the last page. "Look at the total," I said. Jerome looked. His face went white. He looked like he was going to vomit. $3,100,450, he read. "That is your inheritance," I said, my voice cold as steel. "You spent it already. You spent it staying out of prison. You spent it on cars you wrecked. You spent it on a life you did not earn. I do not owe you a dime, son. You owe me $100,000. But because I am a generous father, I will forgive the balance." Jerome looked up at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pure, unadulterated panic. "But Dad," he stammered, "I need this money. You do not understand. They will kill me." "Then you better get a job," I said. Courtney threw the papers on the floor. "This is a joke," she shrieked. "This is some sick joke. You are sitting on millions. We know it. You cannot do this to us." I walked to the door. The broken latch hung loosely. I opened it wide. "Get out," I said. "No," Jerome yelled. He clenched his fists. "I am not leaving until I get what I came for." I reached behind the door and picked up a heavy iron wrench. I did not raise it. I just held it. It was heavy and cold in my hand. "You got what you came for," I said. "You got the truth. Now get out of my house before I call the sheriff and add a trespassing charge to your tab." Jerome looked at the wrench. He looked at me. He saw that the old man was not bluffing. He saw that the father who had always saved him was gone. He grabbed Courtney's arm and dragged her out the door. She was screaming curses at me, calling me a selfish old monster, promising that I would die alone and rot in this house. I watched them get into their leased Range Rover. I watched them drive away, tires screeching. I closed the door. I propped a chair under the handle to keep it shut. I went back to my armchair. I picked up the brass valve and the oily rag. My hands were steady. My heart was slow. I knew this was not over. I knew Jerome was desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. But he had made his move. Now it was my turn. And I had prepared for this war for a very long time. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It rang twice. "Mr. Katz," I said. Enoch the lawyer answered. "It has been a long time." "Is it time?" "It is time," I said. "Cut them off. Cancel the lease on their apartment. Cancel the car payments. Freeze the credit cards I gave them access to. Initiate Protocol B." "Understood," Katz said. "It begins now." I hung up the phone. I looked at the empty room. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was ready. The first shot had been fired, but the war for my dignity had just begun. Exactly 1 week passed since I kicked my ungrateful son out of my house. The silence in my home was heavy, but it was peaceful. I went back to my routine. I woke up early. I drank my coffee black. I checked the logistics reports from my company on a secure tablet that I kept hidden under a loose floorboard. I was expecting retaliation. I was expecting a lawsuit. I was expecting a brick through the window. What I did not expect was a phone call from Courtney. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I wanted her to sweat. When I finally answered, her voice was so sweet it could have caused a cavity. It was a complete transformation from the screeching banshee who had insulted my home just 7 days prior. "Hi, Enoch," she chirped. "I hope I am not disturbing you. Jerome and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We were so wrong. The stress of the debt, the fear it made us act like people we are not. We want to apologize properly." I said nothing. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the desperate rhythm of her breathing. She was lying. I knew it. She knew it. But the game had to be played. She continued when I did not respond. "My parents are in town, Enoch. They flew in from Connecticut this morning. They have heard so much about you, and they are dying to meet the man who raised such a spirited son. We are having a private dinner tonight at our penthouse. Please come. Let us start over. For family." I looked around my dusty living room. Then I thought about the penthouse she mentioned, the one in Midtown with the floor-to-ceiling windows. The one that cost $8,000 a month, the one they claimed they paid for with Jerome's crypto earnings. The truth was I paid for it. I paid for it through a shell company called Atlas Trust. They thought they had won a housing lottery for young entrepreneurs. In reality, their landlord was the father they despised. I had been subsidizing their delusions of grandeur for 2 years, hoping the stability would help Jerome find his footing. Instead, it only fed his ego. "I will be there," I said simply. 7 p.m., she said, clearly relieved. "Dress comfortably. We are family." I hung up. I did not dress comfortably. I went to my closet and pushed aside the flannel shirts and mechanic coveralls. In the back inside a garment bag hung a suit I had not worn in a decade. It was old, yes, but it was bespoke Italian wool cut by a tailor in Naples who dressed kings. It was a remnant of the life I lived before I decided to hide my wealth. I put it on. It was a little tight in the shoulders, but it still fit. I looked in the mirror. I did not see a mechanic. I saw a CEO. I saw a man who had built an empire from dirt. Before I left, I reached into a small box on my dresser. I pulled out a digital voice recorder no bigger than a stick of gum. I slipped it into the inside pocket of the suit jacket. If I was walking into a snake pit, I wanted to make sure I could identify the venom later. I drove my battered truck to the city center. I parked 2 blocks away so the valet would not sneeze at my rust bucket. I walked to the building. The doorman stopped me, looking at my face, then my hands. "Delivery entrance is in the back," he said. I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. "I own Unit 42B, I said, "and I own the building management company that signs your paycheck. Check the list for Freeman." He checked. He turned pale. He opened the door. I rode the elevator up to the penthouse. I stood outside the door. I could hear laughter inside, the clinking of crystal, the sound of people who thought they were better than the world. I took a breath. I tapped the recorder in my pocket to ensure it was on. Then I knocked. Courtney opened the door. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my truck. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she saw me, perhaps realizing that the old mechanic cleaned up better than she expected. "Enoch," she exclaimed, pulling me into a stiff, perfume-clouded hug. "You made it. Come in. Come in." I walked into the apartment I paid for. I walked on the Persian rugs I indirectly bought. Jerome was by the bar mixing drinks. He looked nervous. He would not meet my eyes. And sitting on the white leather sofa were Courtney's parents. They were exactly what I expected. The father, Richard, was a large man with a face flushed from years of expensive scotch. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons. The mother, Patricia, was thin blonde and wore enough diamonds to light up a runway. They looked at me the way a person looks at a zoo animal that has somehow escaped its cage. "Dad." Mom Courtney said, her voice tight. "This is Enoch, Jerome's father." Richard did not stand up. He just extended a hand from the sofa, forcing me to lean down to shake it. His grip was weak like dead fish. "Enoch," he said. "Interesting name. Old Testament, isn't it? Very rural." "It means dedicated," I said, releasing his hand. Patricia smiled, a thin stretching of lips that did not reach her ice-blue eyes. "We have heard so much about you. Jerome tells us you worked with your hands your whole life. How quaint. It must be so satisfying to be simple, to not have the burdens of the corporate world." I sat down in an armchair opposite them. "It is honest work," I said. Jerome brought me a drink, a beer. Everyone else had wine. He put the bottle down on a coaster. "Thanks, Dad," he mumbled. We moved to the dining table. It was set with silverware that shined under the chandelier. The view of the Atlanta skyline was breathtaking. I knew exactly how much that view cost per square foot. Dinner was a slow torture of backhanded compliments and veiled insults. They served a roast that was dry and vegetables that were overcooked but presented as if it were a Michelin star meal. "So Enoch," Richard said, slicing his meat. "Jerome tells us you live in the old neighborhood. Is it safe?" "We worry so much about safety. You know how those areas can be." "Those areas," I repeated. "You know," Patricia chimed in, waving her fork. "Urban. We tried to get Jerome to move to a gated community in Buckhead, but he insisted on this penthouse. Though I suppose he gets his stubbornness from you." I looked at Jerome. He was staring at his plate, sawing at his meat with unnecessary force. "The neighborhood is fine," I said. "I have lived there for 40 years. My neighbors are good people." Of course," Richard said quickly, as if soothing a child. "I am sure they are fine people. In their own way. We just value a certain caliber of neighbor. People who share our values." "And what values are those?" I asked. Richard laughed. A booming, empty sound. "You know, ambition, culture. We are very involved in the arts, the symphony, the museum boards. I suppose you do not have much time for that sort of thing, fixing cars all day." "Actually," I started, but Jerome interrupted me. "Dad doesn't really go out," Jerome said, looking at his in-laws with a desperate, pleading expression. "He is a homebody. He likes his TV shows. He is a simple guy." I looked at my son. He was ashamed of me. He was sitting there in a suit I paid for, in an apartment I paid for, letting these people mock his father to elevate himself. He was selling his own history for a seat at their table. Patricia turned to me. "You know, Enoch, I must say your English is very good, very articulate. I was expecting, well, you know how some people from the South can speak. It is a pleasant surprise. You almost sound educated." I slowly placed my fork down. The metal clicked against the china. The room went silent. "I read a lot," I said. "That is wonderful," she beamed. "Good for you. Self-improvement is so important." Jerome laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Yeah, Dad loves his old books, mostly manuals and stuff, but he reads." I felt a cold fire in my chest. It was not anger, it was clarity. I saw them for what they were, small people in big clothes. They thought they were the kings of the world because they had inherited money and status. They thought I was dirt because I had oil under my nails. And my son was one of them. The microaggressions continued. They commented on how I used the wrong fork for the salad. They made jokes about welfare queens and crime rates, looking at me out of the corner of their eyes to see if I would react. They treated me like a fascinating experiment, a savage they had invited to dinner to show how charitable they were. I ate their dry roast. I drank their beer. I let the recorder in my pocket capture every word, every insult, every giggle. Then the main course was cleared. Courtney brought out a bottle of red wine. She held it like it was the Holy Grail. Now she announced, "We have a special treat. Dad brought this from his private cellar. It is a vintage Cabernet. Very rare, very expensive. We wanted to share it to celebrate our new understanding." Richard puffed out his chest. "Indeed. This bottle goes for $500 at auction. I doubt you have ever tasted anything like it, Enoch. It is an acquired taste. You have to have a palate for it." He poured a small amount into a glass and slid it towards me. "Try it," he commanded. "Tell us what you think." They were all watching me, waiting for me to chug it, waiting for me to say it tasted like grape juice, waiting for me to prove I did not belong. I picked up the glass. I swirled it. I looked at the color against the light. I brought it to my nose and inhaled deeply. Then I took a sip. I let it sit on my tongue. I swallowed. I placed the glass down gently. "Well," Richard asked, smirking, "what do you detect?" I looked him dead in the eye. "It is corked," I said. The smile vanished from his face. "What?" "It is corked," I repeated calmly. "And it is not a vintage Cabernet. It has high tannin levels, yes, but the finish is acidic. It tastes like it was bottled in a hurry, and there is a distinct note of artificial oak flavoring." Patricia gasped. "Excuse me," I continued. "Real aged Cabernet has notes of blackcurrant and cedar. This tastes like sawdust and vinegar. I would guess this is a $20 table wine with a printed label pasted on to look impressive." Richard turned purple. "How dare you? This is a private reserve. It is swill," I said. "And if you paid $500 for it, you are the one who lacks a palate, Richard." Jerome looked terrified. "Dad, stop. You do not know what you are talking about." I ignored him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. I tossed it on the table. "That should cover the bottle," I said. "And the dry roast." Courtney stood up. Her face was twisted in fury. "You ungrateful old man. We try to be nice to you. We invite you into our home, and you insult us." I stood up too. I buttoned my jacket. "This is not your home, Courtney," I said. "And you were not trying to be nice. You were trying to put me in my place. But you failed, because you do not know where my place is." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "Get out! Get out of this apartment." Then came the real reason for the dinner. "Wait!" Jerome shouted. He ran to a sideboard and grabbed a folder. He rushed over to me. "Dad, please, just wait. We did not bring you here just for dinner. We need to talk business." "Business?" I asked. "Yes. Look, the doctor said you are getting older. Your memory is slipping. We are worried about you managing your finances alone. The neighborhood is dangerous. People prey on the elderly." He held out a document. I looked at it. It was a power of attorney form. It would give Jerome full control over my assets, my bank accounts, and my medical decisions. It would give him the power to put me in a home and sell my house. "Just sign it," Dad, Jerome pleaded. "It is for your own good. Richard and Patricia can help us manage your assets. They have financial advisors. We can grow your little savings. We can make sure you are taken care of." I looked at the document. Then I looked at Richard. "So this is the plan," I said. "You insult me for an hour, feed me bad food, and then expect me to sign over my life to the son who owes me $3 million. "We are trying to help you," Patricia snapped. "You are obviously not competent. The way you behaved tonight proves it. A sane man would be grateful." I picked up the document. Jerome looked hopeful. I slowly tore it in half. Then I tore it again. I dropped the pieces on the floor next to the $20 bill. "I am not senile," I said. "I am just disappointed." I turned to leave. "You will regret this," Richard shouted after me. "You are a nobody, a grease monkey. We will destroy you in court. We have lawyers who eat people like you for breakfast." I stopped at the door. I turned back. "Richard," I said, "your suit is polyester blend, and your watch is a replica. The second hand is ticking, not sweeping. You are broke, aren't you? That is why you are here. You are looking for a bailout from my son, who is looking for a bailout from me." Richard's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Patricia covered her diamond necklace with her hand as if I could see through the fake stones. I opened the door. "Jerome," I said, "you picked the wrong team." I walked out. I walked down the hall to the elevator. I could hear them screaming at each other behind the closed door. I went down to the lobby. I walked to my truck. I took off the suit jacket and threw it on the passenger seat. I loosened my tie. I drove home with the windows down, letting the night air wash the smell of cheap perfume and desperation off me. I touched the recorder in my pocket. I had everything I needed. They had shown their hand. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old man. They had no idea they had just declared war on a general. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of real bourbon. I sat in my chair. I listened to the recording. You people. Urban. Simple. Competent. I saved the file. I named it Evidence A. Then I called Mr. Katz. It is worse than we thought, I told him. They are coming for guardianship. They want to declare me incompetent. Let them try, Katz said. We are ready. Not yet, I said. I want to hit them where it hurts. I want to cut the cord. The next morning, I sent the order. The rent payments for the penthouse stopped. The lease was under a company name, and I invoked a clause that allowed for immediate termination for conduct violations. I cited unauthorized subletting and noise complaints. I also canceled the auto pay on the Range Rover. Then I sat back and waited. The dinner had been a skirmish. But the siege was about to begin. The only pure thing in my life was Layla. She was 10 years old with eyes that held the same spark my late wife Esther had. My son Jerome might have been a disappointment, and his wife Courtney might have been a vulture, but Layla was innocent. She was the reason I kept the tuition checks flowing to that private academy in Buckhead. She was the reason I tolerated their disrespect for so long. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, I drove my old truck to the school gates. It was the highlight of my day. She would run out her backpack bouncing and tell me about science class or the book she was reading. It was our time. But that Tuesday was different. I pulled up to the curb, the engine of my truck rumbling a low rhythm. I saw the other parents in their luxury SUVs, the ones I secretly owned the leases on through my finance company, looking at me with their usual mix of pity and disdain. I ignored them. I got out and walked toward the gate. Usually Ralph, the security guard, would wave me through. We would talk about the Falcons game or the weather. I had helped Ralph with a down payment on his car 2 years ago, anonymously, of course. Today Ralph did not wave. He stepped in front of the gate, his hand resting on his belt. He would not meet my eyes. "Mr. Freeman," he said, his voice stiff, "you need to step back." I stopped. I looked at him. I smiled, thinking it was a joke. "Ralph, it is me," I said. "I am just here for Layla." "I know who you are, sir," he said, "but I cannot let you on the premises. You have been removed from the authorized pickup list." My smile vanished. The air suddenly felt very cold. "Removed?" I asked. "By whom?" "By her father, Jerome Freeman," Ralph said, "and her mother. They filed an emergency update with the administration this morning. They flagged you as a safety risk. A safety risk." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had built this city's logistics network. I commanded fleets of trucks. I had never raised a hand in anger against a child in my life. "I need to speak to the principal," I said, taking a step forward. Ralph put a hand on my chest. "Please do not make this difficult, Enoch. The school resource officer is already watching." I looked past Ralph's shoulder. I saw the officer, a man I did not know, hand on his holster, staring me down like I was a criminal. And then past him, I saw her. Layla was standing by the double doors. She was looking around, searching for my truck. Her face lit up when she saw me. She started to run. "Grandpa," she yelled. She took 2 steps before a teacher grabbed her backpack strap. Layla struggled. She pointed at me. I could see her shouting, but I could not hear the words over the sound of the idling cars. I saw the teacher say something to her. I saw Layla's face crumble. She looked at me, confusion and terror washing over her features. "Let me talk to her," I growled. "Sir, if you do not leave the property immediately, you will be arrested for trespassing," the officer shouted, walking toward us. I stood there gripping the iron bars of the fence. My knuckles turned gray. I watched my granddaughter crying, reaching her hand out toward me through the gaps in the fence. They were dragging her back inside the building. She looked at me like I had abandoned her, like I had broken a promise. Jerome had done this. He knew he could not hurt me with words, so he used the only weapon that could pierce my armor. He used an innocent child. He turned the school I paid for into a fortress against me. I looked at Ralph one last time. "You know this is wrong," I said. "I am just doing my job." "Mr. Freeman," he whispered. I turned around. I walked back to my truck. I did not look back because I could not bear to see the empty space where Layla should have been. I drove home in a silence so loud it made my ears ring. I sat in my living room with the lights off. The rage was different this time. It was not hot. It was absolute zero. I poured a glass of water and set it on the table. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor across the street. She was a nosy woman, but useful. "You need to see this," the text read. She included a link. I clicked it. It opened a social media app. It was a live stream. Courtney's face filled the screen. She had perfected the art of the victim. Her mascara was slightly smudged, just enough to look distressed but still camera-ready. She was sitting in her kitchen, the granite countertops gleaming under a ring light. "Hey guys," she said, her voice trembling. "I did not want to do this. I really did not. But I have to protect my family." The viewer count was climbing. 500, 1,000, 3,000. She wiped a tear that did not exist. "You guys know how much we have tried to help Jerome's father, Enoch. We have invited him into our home. We have tried to include him. But today we had to make a heartbreaking decision." She paused for dramatic effect. The comments were flying by. Prayers, heart emojis, angry faces. "Enoch is not well," she whispered. "We suspect it is early onset Alzheimer's combined with aggressive tendencies. He has been violent. He has been forgetting who we are. He thinks people are stealing from him. He has hallucinations." My hand tightened around the phone. "Today, he tried to take our daughter Layla from school," she continued. "He was in a rage. He was screaming at the security guards. He had a weapon. Thank God the police were there to stop him. We have had to file a restraining order. It breaks my heart, guys. It really does. But we cannot let him near Layla. He is dangerous. He is a danger to himself and others." The comments section was a cesspool. "Lock him up. Protect the child. He sounds like a monster. Do not let that old man near her." Jerome walked into the frame behind her. He put a hand on her shoulder, looking stoic and brave. "We just want him to get help," Jerome said to the camera. "But he refuses. He would rather live in squalor and attack us than accept our love. We are cutting him off for his own good." They were rewriting history in real time. They were taking my reputation, my dignity, and my sanity and shredding it for an audience of strangers. They were painting a target on my back. If I walked down the street now, people would not see Enoch the mechanic. They would see Enoch the violent lunatic. They were not just attacking me, they were preparing the battlefield. This was the narrative they needed for the guardianship hearing. If the world believed I was crazy and violent, a judge would sign my life over to them without blinking. I watched until the end. I watched them beg for prayers and subtly for donations to help with legal fees to protect their daughter. They were monetizing their betrayal. I turned off the phone. I sat in the darkness. The shadows stretched across the floorboards. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought that by taking Layla and destroying my name, I would crumble. They expected me to show up at their door screaming, proving their lies to be true. But they forgot that I am a man who plays the long game. I picked up my secure phone, the burner I used for high-level business. I dialed a number that bypassed the receptionist and went straight to the private line of Katz, my attorney, and the only man who knew the full extent of my empire. "It rang once," Freeman Katz said. His voice was sharp. "I saw the live stream. Do you want me to sue for defamation?" "No," I said. My voice was calm, unnervingly calm. "A lawsuit takes too long. They want a public fight. They want to drag this out." "Then what are your instructions?" Katz asked. "Initiate the purge," I said. There was a pause on the line. Katz knew what that meant. "We had drafted this protocol years ago, a nuclear option in case of emergency." "Level 1, Katz asked. "All levels," I said. "I want you to cut the cord. Completely. The apartment lease is under the Atlas Trust. Invoke the morality clause. Terminate it immediately. Give them 24 hours to vacate." "Done," Katz said. "The cars," I continued. "The Range Rover and the Porsche. They are leased through the logistics fleet account. Report them as unauthorized use. Have them repossessed. Tonight. Consider it done." "And Katz," I said, looking at the empty spot on the wall where a picture of Jerome used to hang. "Yes, Enoch. The credit cards. The ones I gave them access to under the guise of the family trust. The ones they are using to buy those cameras and ring lights." "Kill them." Katz finished the sentence for me. "Kill them. I confirmed. Mark them as stolen. Flag every transaction from the last 30 days as fraud. Freeze their personal accounts that are linked to the trust for overdraft protection. I want them to wake up tomorrow and find that they cannot buy a pack of gum. It will be scorched earth, Enoch Katz warned. They will be destitute. They stole my granddaughter, I said. They tried to steal my mind. Scorched earth is too kind for them. I want them to know what cold feels like. I hung up the phone. I did not turn on the lights. I sat there listening to the house settle. I thought about Layla's face at the window. I thought about the fear in her eyes. I would get her back, but first I had to break the people holding her hostage. I had to show them that the money they worshipped was not theirs. It was mine, and the tap was officially dry. Tomorrow their world would end, and I would be watching. The sun rose over Midtown Atlanta, reflecting off the glass towers that housed the city's elite. Inside the penthouse that my money paid for, Courtney was preparing for her coronation. It was the annual Influencer Summit, a gathering of people who were famous for being famous. She had spent the last week curating her outfit. It was a white designer jumpsuit that cost $3,000 paired with a handbag that cost $5,000. She looked in the mirror and saw a star. I looked at the security feed on my tablet and saw a woman standing on a trap door that was about to open. She started her live stream in the elevator. She held the phone high, finding the perfect angle to show off her cheekbones and the diamond earrings I had unknowingly financed. "Good morning, beautiful people," she chirped to her followers. "Today is a huge day. We are heading to the summit in the new Range Rover. Hard work pays off, guys. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." She walked into the parking garage. Her heels clicked loudly on the concrete. The garage was filled with Porsches, Teslas, and Mercedes. But right in the front, in the reserved spot, sat the black Range Rover Autobiography. It was a beast of a machine. Jerome had begged for it, claiming he needed it to impress crypto investors. I had leased it through the fleet account of Freeman Logistics, my company. To them it was a gift. To me it was a company asset. And assets can be liquidated. Courtney walked up to the driver's side door. She smiled at her phone camera. She pressed the unlock button on her key fob. Nothing happened. She frowned. She pressed it again. Harder. The lights did not flash. The mirrors did not unfold. The door handle did not pop out. The car sat there, a $100,000 paperweight. She laughed nervously at the camera. "Technology, right, guys? 1 second." She pressed the button repeatedly. She pulled the handle. Locked. She walked around this car, tapping the fob against the glass. She looked inside. The dashboard was dark. The security light was not blinking. It was dead. "What is going on?" she muttered, her smile vanishing. She did not know that at 6 a.m. I had contacted the Fleet Management Service. I had reported the vehicle as compromised. They had sent a remote signal to the onboard computer. The engine was immobilized. The doors were dead-bolted. The ignition was encrypted. It was not a car anymore. It was a brick of steel and leather. Courtney started to panic. She had 5,000 people watching her fail to open her own car. She kicked the tire. She screamed at the window. She called Jerome, but he was still asleep, hungover from the stress of the previous night. She was trapped in the garage in her white jumpsuit with a dead phone signal and a dead car. And then she heard the sound. The sound of a heavy diesel engine echoing off the concrete walls. A massive flatbed tow truck rumbled around the corner. It was not a polite roadside assistance vehicle. It was a repo truck. It was bright yellow, dirty, and loud. The air brakes hissed as it backed up, blocking the exit ramp. The reverse beeping noise was deafening in the enclosed space. Courtney lowered her phone, but she forgot to end the stream. Her followers were watching as a man in a greasy orange vest hopped out of the cab. He held a clipboard. He did not look like he cared about influencers. He looked like he had a job to do and he wanted to get it done before lunch. "Hey," Courtney shouted, waving her hand. "You cannot park there. I am trying to leave. My car is just stuck." The man ignored her. He walked over to the Range Rover. He checked the license plate against his clipboard. He nodded. "This is the unit." He grunted. "What do you mean, unit?" she shrieked. "This is my car. Get away from it." The man looked at her. He looked bored. "Ma'am, I have a repossession order for a 2023 Range Rover VIN ending in 492, authorized by the leaseholder." "I am the leaseholder," she yelled. "My husband bought this car. You have the wrong guy." The man handed her the paper. He did not argue. He just pointed to the line at the top. "Read the owner," he said. Courtney snatched the paper. Her eyes scanned the document. Her face went pale. Her hands started to shake. "Freeman Logistics," she whispered. "That is right," the man said. "Reported as unauthorized use of company property. Keys are void. We are taking it." "No," she screamed. "You cannot. My father-in-law owns that company. He gave this to us. This is a mistake." The repo man shrugged. He walked back to his truck and lowered the hydraulic lift. The metal scraped against the floor, a screeching sound that made Courtney flinch. Courtney ran to the front of the car. She stood between the bumper and the tow truck. "I am not moving," she yelled. "You will have to run me over." The repo man sighed. He pulled out his phone. "Dispatch," he said, his voice echoing. "We have a hostile on site. Send PD." The threat of the police snapped her out of her standoff, but it was too late for her dignity. The commotion had drawn attention. The elevator doors opened. Neighbors were coming out. These were the people Courtney tried so hard to impress. The bankers, the lawyers, the socialites. They stood there with their dogs and their coffees watching the scene. They saw the woman in the white jumpsuit screaming at a repo man. They saw the tow truck hooking up the chains to the axle of the luxury car. "Is that Courtney?" someone whispered. "I thought they owned that car." "Guess the crypto market crashed." Someone else laughed. Phones came out. They were not watching her live stream. They were recording their own content. The hashtag Repo Queen was trending in Buckhead before the car even hit the flatbed. Courtney tried to hide her face, but there was nowhere to go. She watched as the truck winched the Range Rover up the ramp. The suspension groaned. The tires squealed. It was a violent, ugly process. "Wait!" she begged, running alongside the truck as it began to pull away. "My purse is inside, my laptop, my makeup. You can pick them up at the impound lot in DeKalb," the driver shouted over the engine roar. "Bring proof of ownership." The truck rumbled up the ramp and into the daylight. Courtney was left standing in an empty parking spot. There was a puddle of oil on the ground where the truck had been. Her white jumpsuit was splattered with dirty water from the tires. Her followers were spamming the chat with laughing emojis. Her neighbors were whispering and pointing. She stood there, stripped of her armor, exposed as a fraud. She let out a scream of pure frustration that echoed through the garage, but no one came to help. They just watched. I was sitting on the bank of the Chattahoochee River. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky. I had my fishing line in the water, but I did not have any bait on the hook. I was not there to catch fish. I was there to catch my breath. My phone buzzed on the cooler beside me. It was Jerome. I picked it up slowly. I did not say hello. I just listened. "Dad, what is happening?" Jerome screamed. His voice was high and thin. "Courtney just called me. She is hysterical. They took the car. They took the Rover. They said you reported it stolen. I watched a leaf float down the river." "I did not report it stolen, Jerome," I said calmly. "I reported it as a recalled asset." "Recalled?" he shouted. "What does that mean?" "It means the company is undergoing a restructuring," I said. "I am liquidating non-essential assets. And a $100,000 SUV being driven by an unemployed man and his influencer wife is the definition of non-essential." "You cannot do this," he stammered. "We have a lease. We have an agreement. You have a handshake with a father who thought his son was worth the investment," I corrected. "That father is retired. The new CEO is cutting costs." "But Courtney," he whined, "she is stranded. She has an event. She is in the middle of Midtown in high heels. How is she supposed to get there?" I reeled in my line a few inches. The ratchet clicked softly. "She has legs, Jerome," I said. "Walking builds character, or she can take the bus. I hear the transit system is very reliable." "Dad, stop this," he pleaded. "People are watching. The neighbors are filming. This is humiliating." "Is it?" I asked. "Is it more humiliating than demanding money from your father? Is it more humiliating than trying to put me in a home?" I waited for an answer. All I heard was his ragged breathing. "The car is gone, son," I said. "And by the way, the apartment lease is next. I suggest you start packing boxes." I hung up the phone. I turned it off and tossed it onto the passenger seat of my truck. I picked up my fishing rod. The river flowed on indifferent to the chaos I had unleashed. I took a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. It tasted like justice. Back in the city, Courtney was walking. She was walking on the cracked sidewalk of Peachtree Street. Her feet were blistered. Her white jumpsuit was stained with sweat. People honked at her. She looked like a runway model who had fallen off the stage and landed in the gutter. She was learning the first lesson of her new life. The ride is over. I sat in the dark of my living room listening to the hum of the surveillance server I had installed in the basement. My son thought he was hiding in that apartment I was about to evict him from, But he forgot that I owned the building management company. I had access to the security feeds in the hallway and the audio sensors in the smoke detectors. I was not invading his privacy. I was monitoring my investment. And my investment was failing. I heard the phone ring in their apartment. It was on speaker. The voice on the other end was not polite. It was a man named Marcus, a loan shark who operated out of a strip club in Decatur. "You have 24 hours, Jerome," the voice growled. "My boss does not care about your inheritance problems. He cares about his $300,000. Pay up or we start taking fingers." The line went dead. I watched the feed. Jerome was pacing the living room like a trapped rat. He was sweating. He looked at Courtney. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by moving boxes, her face a mask of cold calculation. They were desperate, and desperation breeds creativity of the worst kind. "We need a big play," Courtney said. Her voice was flat. No emotion, no fear, just strategy. The old man cut the cards. He took the car. "He is not going to give us cash unless it is a matter of life and death." Jerome stopped pacing. "What do you mean, life and death?" "I mean, you are sick, Jerome," she said, standing up. "You are dying. You have cancer. Stage 4. You need experimental surgery in Switzerland. It costs $500,000. He cannot say no to that. If he lets his son die, he is a monster, and the whole world will know it." I listened as they plotted. It was the most disgusting performance I had ever witnessed. Courtney went into the bathroom and came out with a pair of electric clippers. She sat Jerome down in a kitchen chair. "We have to sell it," she said. She turned on the clippers. The buzzing sound was loud on the audio feed. I watched as my daughter-in-law shaved my son's head. Clump by clump, his dark hair fell to the floor. She did not stop there. She took her makeup kit, the one she used to make herself look glamorous, and she used it to make him look like a corpse. She contoured his cheekbones to make them look hollow. She put dark circles under his eyes. She used a pale foundation to drain the life from his skin. Jerome looked in the mirror. He practiced a cough. It sounded weak and pathetic. "Good," Courtney said. "Now stop eating. For the next 24 hours you only drink water. We need you shaking. We need you weak. I will type up the medical report. I have a template from that fraud forum on the dark web." I sat in my chair and felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They were not just greedy. They were sociopaths. They were willing to mock the suffering of millions of real cancer patients just to hustle their own father. I turned off the monitor. I did not need to see any more. I knew they were coming. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. I waited. The next morning the knock came. It was weak, hesitant. I opened the door. Jerome was standing there leaning against the doorframe. If I did not know the truth, my heart would have stopped. He looked terrible. His skull was bare and shiny. His skin was the color of old parchment. He was trembling, his hands shaking violently at his sides. He held a handkerchief to his mouth. "Dad," he rasped, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. My face was a mask of concern. I had to be a better actor than he was. "My God, Jerome," I said, my voice full of shock. "What happened to you? You look like death." He stumbled into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. He coughed a deep, rattling sound that shook his whole body. He pulled the handkerchief away and I saw red stains. It was food coloring and corn syrup. I could smell the sugar. "It is bad, Dad," he whispered. "I did not want to tell you. I wanted to handle it myself. But I ran out of time." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled file folder. He handed it to me with a shaking hand. I opened it. It was a masterpiece of forgery. The letterhead belonged to a prestigious oncology center in Houston. The diagnosis was complex. Pancreatic adenocarcinoma, stage 4, immediate intervention required. The cost estimate was attached. $500,000 for a specialized procedure in Zurich. I read the papers slowly. I looked at the signature at the bottom. Dr. Rufus Johnson, M.D. I looked up at Jerome. Tears were streaming down his face. They were real tears, but they were tears of fear for the loan sharks, not fear of death. "I do not want to die, Dad," he sobbed. "I know I have been a bad son. I know I messed up with the money. But please, I am scared. Courtney is scared. This is my only chance." He slid off the sofa and fell to his knees. He grabbed my hand. His grip was clammy. "Help me," he begged. "Please." I will sign whatever you want. I will give up the inheritance. Just save my life. I need the money today. The clinic needs the deposit to book the flight and the surgery." I looked down at him. I saw the makeup caked in the creases of his neck. I saw the desperation of a man who had dug a grave so deep he could only see darkness. He was begging for his life, but not because of cancer. He was begging because Marcus the loan shark was checking his watch. I let a single tear roll down my cheek. I squeezed his hand. "My poor boy," I said softly. "My poor foolish boy. Why did you wait so long to tell me?" "I was ashamed," he cried. "Stand up, Jerome," I said. I pulled him to his feet. I looked him in the eye. "You are my son," I said. "I will not let you die. Money is just paper. Your life is everything." Hope flooded his eyes. He thought he had won. He thought the old man had finally cracked. "Thank you, Dad," he breathed. "Thank you. Can we go to the bank?" I shook my head. "No bank, Jerome. Not yet." His face fell. "What do you mean?" "We need to hurry. We are going to get a second opinion," I said firmly. "No," he shouted too quickly. Then he coughed to cover his mistake. "No, Dad, there is no time. The doctors in Houston said I have days. We have to wire the money now." I put my hands on his shoulders. "Jerome, listen to me," I said. "I am not sending my son to a foreign country to be cut open by strangers without verification. I have connections. I have a very dear friend who is the best specialist in the state. I already called him while you were in the bathroom. He is waiting for us." "But Dad," Jerome stammered. "No buts," I commanded. "If this Dr. Johnson says you need the surgery, I will write the check right there in his office. I will charter a private jet. I will go with you, but I need to hear it from him." Jerome looked trapped. He could not say no without blowing his cover. He had to play along. He nodded weakly. "Okay, Dad, but we have to be fast." I grabbed my car keys. "Let us go," I said. I led him to my truck. He climbed into the passenger seat, looking small and frail in his oversized clothes. I drove. I did not drive fast. I drove with the steady pace of a man who knows exactly where he is going. Jerome was texting furiously on his phone, probably warning Courtney that there was a complication. I ignored him. I drove out of the neighborhood. I drove toward the industrial district, past the warehouses and the factories. "Where are we going?" Jerome asked, looking out the window nervously. "The hospital is the other way. This is a private clinic." I lied. "Very exclusive. Only for the toughest cases." We turned down a side street. We pulled into a small parking lot in front of a brick building. There was a sign out front with a picture of a golden retriever and a cat. The sign read Paws and Claws Veterinary Clinic. I put the truck in park. I turned off the engine. The silence in the cab was absolute. Jerome looked at the sign. Then he looked at me. His confusion was genuine. "Dad," he said, "this is a vet." I turned in my seat to face him. I looked at his shaved head. I looked at his makeup. I looked at the fake blood on his collar. "I know," I said. Jerome laughed nervously. "I do not understand. Why are we here?" I reached over and grabbed the medical file from his lap. I opened it to the last page. I pointed to the signature. "Dr. Rufus Johnson," I read. "Yes," Jerome said. "The oncologist." I looked him dead in the eye. "Dr. Rufus Johnson is my veterinarian, Jerome. He has been treating my old dog Buster for arthritis for 5 years. He is a good man. He specializes in canine distemper and feline leukemia." Jerome's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, for real this time, no makeup required. I continued, my voice hard as granite. "I called him this morning. I asked him if he had branched out into treating humans. He told me he hadn't. He also told me he has never been to Houston." Jerome started to shake. "Dad, I can explain. Explain what I roared. Explain that you shaved your head to con your father. Explain that you painted your face like a clown to steal $500,000. Explain that you are so morally bankrupt that you would fake a terminal illness while real people are fighting for their lives." "I didn't mean to," he sobbed. "I need the money. They are going to hurt me." "Then let them hurt you," I said. "Maybe pain will teach you what love could not." I reached across and opened the passenger door. "Get out," I said. "Dad, please," he begged. "I cannot walk home like this. I look like a freak." "You look like exactly what you are," I said. "A fraud. Now get out before I take you inside and have Dr. Johnson neuter you to make sure you never reproduce again." Jerome scrambled out of the truck. He stood on the pavement, shivering in the sunlight, a bald-painted man with nowhere to go. I slammed the door. I rolled down the window. "One more thing, Jerome," I said. I sent a copy of that fake medical report to the fraud division of the Insurance Commission. Using a licensed practitioner's name for a scam is a felony. You might want to start running. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I watched him in the rearview mirror shrinking into the distance standing in front of the veterinary clinic. He was alone. He was exposed. And for the first time in his life, he had absolutely no one to save him. I drove home feeling a strange mixture of grief and victory. I had lost a son, but I had regained my self-respect. The cancer was fake, but the rot in our family was very real. And I had just cut it out. The smell of rotten eggs and cheap spray paint filled the morning air. It was a smell I associated with Halloween pranks from 50 years ago, not with my own front porch on a Tuesday in Atlanta. I stood there with a bucket of soapy water and a stiff bristle brush scrubbing the word monster off my white siding. The red paint was still tacky. It smeared before it started to fade. A car drove by slowly. A woman leaned out the window. She was a deaconess at my church. I had fixed her radiator for free last winter. "You should be ashamed of yourself, Enoch," she shouted. She threw a half-empty soda cup at my mailbox. It burst, spraying sticky brown liquid over the wood. I did not shout back. I did not wave my arms or try to explain that I was not the villain in this story. I just dipped my brush into the bucket and kept scrubbing. Circular motions. Wax on, wax off. The discipline of a man who knows that dirt eventually washes away if you have enough patience. The live stream Courtney had posted was doing its work. The internet is a wildfire and lies are the gasoline. To the world, I was a senile, violent abuser who was hoarding money while his family suffered. The neighborhood, the people I had lived beside for decades had turned on me overnight. They did not need proof. They just needed a story that made them feel righteous. I looked toward the street. Jerome was standing on the sidewalk. He was holding his phone up, filming me. He had a ring light clipped to the top of it. He was wearing a hoodie, trying to look humble and beleaguered. "Look at him, guys," Jerome narrated to his audience. "He is out here trying to clean up the mess he caused. He is so confused. He does not even know why people are angry. It is heartbreaking." He panned the camera to the red paint on my wall. "This is what happens when a community gets tired of abuse," he said. "We do not condone vandalism, of course, but people are hurting. We are hurting. If you can spare anything to help us with legal fees to get him into a safe facility, the link is in the bio. Every dollar helps protect my daughter. He was monetizing my humiliation. He was turning my suffering into content." I watched him check his screen. He smiled a small, greedy smile. Someone must have just sent him a donation. I squeezed the handle of the brush until my knuckles cracked. I wanted to walk out there and smash that phone into the asphalt. I wanted to grab him by his collar and shake the truth out of him. But I knew that was exactly what he wanted. He wanted the angry black man. He wanted the violence. It would be the final nail in my coffin. So I stayed on the porch. I washed away the hate inch by inch. I let him film. I let him think he was winning the public opinion war, because I knew that public opinion does not hold up in court, and it certainly does not pay the kind of debts Jerome had. I finished cleaning. I dumped the dirty red water into the flower bed. I went inside and locked the door. I went to the window and peered through the slat of the blinds. Jerome was still there. He was typing on his phone, probably thanking his donors. Then the atmosphere shifted. A large black SUV turned the corner. It was moving fast but silent. It was not a repo truck. It was not a police cruiser. It was a Cadillac Escalade with windows tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. It did not have a license plate on the front. It screeched to a halt right in front of my driveway, blocking Jerome in. Jerome looked up. He lowered his phone. I saw his body language change instantly. The arrogance vanished. His shoulders hunched. He took a step back, looking for an escape route. The doors of the SUV opened. 2 men stepped out. They were not local boys. They were not the neighborhood toughs who threw eggs. These men were professionals. They wore expensive suits that were cut to hide the bulk of shoulder holsters. One was Hispanic with a scar running through his eyebrow. The other was a giant of a man, bald with tattoos creeping up his neck from under his collar. Jerome tried to run. He turned toward my neighbor's yard. The Hispanic man moved with terrifying speed. He caught Jerome by the hood of his sweatshirt and yanked him back. Jerome flew backward and slammed into the side of the black SUV. The sound of his body hitting the metal was a dull, sickening thud. "Please," Jerome screamed. "I have it. I almost have it. Just give me 2 more days." I stood frozen behind the blinds, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was not a family dispute anymore. This was something else. This was the street coming to collect. The bald man stepped in close. He punched Jerome in the stomach. It was a short, controlled blow. Jerome doubled over, gasping for air, retching on the sidewalk. The man grabbed Jerome by the back of his neck and slammed his face onto the hood of the car. Jerome shrieked. Blood started to drip from his nose onto the black paint. "We are done waiting," Jerome, the Hispanic man, said. His voice was low, but in the quiet morning street it carried perfectly to my window. "I told you." Jerome sobbed, his face pressed against the hot metal. "My father, he is dying. The inheritance. It is coming. I swear. 3 million. I will have it all." The bald man leaned down. He put his mouth right next to Jerome's ear. "You have been saying that for 6 months, he growled. "You said the crypto would pay. You said the NFT project would pay. Now you say the dead daddy will pay." "But daddy is not dead, is he, Jerome? We see him washing his house. He looks very healthy. He is sick." Jerome lied, spitting blood. "He is crazy. We are taking control. I will pay you double the interest. Just do not hurt me." The Hispanic man grabbed Jerome's hand. He splayed Jerome's fingers out on the hood of the car. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket. The blade snapped open with a click that echoed like a gunshot. He pressed the blade against Jerome's pinky finger. "The boss does not want interest," he said. "The boss wants his principal, $3 million, by Friday. Or we start sending him pieces of you." Jerome screamed. It was a raw, primal sound of terror. "Please. No. I will get it. I will kidnap him. I will force him to sign. I will do anything." I stepped back from the window. My breath caught in my throat. $3 million. The number echoed in my head. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just a lifestyle choice. It was a death sentence. I understood everything in that second. The urgency, the desperation, the fake cancer, the attempt to declare me incompetent. Jerome wasn't trying to get rich. He was trying to stay alive. He had borrowed money from the cartel. He had gambled it away or lost it in his scams, and now the sharks were circling. He needed my money not to buy a boat, but to buy his life. The Hispanic man lifted the knife. He did not cut the finger, not this time. He just tapped the blade against Jerome's knuckle. "Friday," he said. "Midnight. If we do not have the cash, we take the girl." "No," Jerome yelled. "Not Layla. Leave her out of this." The man slapped Jerome across the face, a backhanded blow that knocked him to the ground. "You brought her into this when you put her school tuition up as collateral," the man said. I felt the room spin. He had used Layla. He had used my granddaughter as collateral for a drug debt. The two men got back into the SUV. The engine roared. They drove away, leaving Jerome curled in a fetal position on the sidewalk, bleeding and weeping in the dirt. I stared at my son. I should have felt pity. I should have run out there with a first aid kit. I should have called the police. But I did not move. I watched him. I saw the monster he had become. He was willing to destroy me, destroy his wife, and even risk his own daughter to cover his mistakes. He had sold us all out. I realized then that the war I was fighting was not just about dignity. It was about survival. If I did not stop him, if I did not neutralize him, those men would come back. And they would not stop at Jerome. They would come for Layla. They would come for me. I walked to my kitchen. I washed my hands again, though they were already clean. I needed to think. I needed a new plan. The legal route was too slow. The police were too bureaucratic. Jerome was cornered. And a cornered animal is unpredictable. I went to the basement. I unlocked the heavy steel door of my secure room. I looked at the wall of monitors. I looked at the safe in the corner. I had been a mechanic. I fixed things. But sometimes a part is too broken to be fixed. Sometimes you have to cut it out before it destroys the whole engine. Jerome dragged himself up from the sidewalk. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at my house. His eyes were filled with a hatred so pure it burned. He limped away down the street. He was going to execute his final option. I did not know what it was yet, but I knew it would be violent. I checked the load in my shotgun. I engaged the perimeter alarms. "Let him come," I whispered to the empty room. "Let him try." I was not just a father anymore. I was the guardian at the gate, and I would burn the world down before I let them touch Layla. The digital clock on my nightstand read 2:14 in the morning. The house was silent, settling into the earth with the groans of old timber that I had memorized over 40 years. Most men my age would be asleep, dreaming of better days, or medicated into oblivion to forget the bad ones. But I was awake. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, fully dressed in dark clothing, listening. I heard the sound I had been expecting for 3 days. It was not a loud crash. It was the subtle, high-pitched whine of a glass cutter scoring the window pane in the kitchen. Then a soft pop as the suction cup pulled the glass away. Then the creak of the sash being lifted. A lesser man would have called 911 immediately. A frightened man would have turned on the lights and screamed. I did neither. I picked up the Mossberg 500 pump-action shotgun that leaned against my nightstand. I checked the safety. I did not chamber a round yet. The sound of a shotgun racking is a psychological weapon, and I wanted to save it for the right moment. I moved into the hallway. I did not walk. I flowed. Decades ago, before I built my logistics empire, before I was a mechanic, I served in a unit that specialized in moving through hostile territory without leaving a footprint. My joints were stiff with age, but my muscle memory was intact. I merged with the shadows in the corner of the living room, a ghost in my own home. 2 beams of light cut through the darkness. Flashlights. They swept across the floor, illuminating the dust motes. Behind the lights were 2 figures dressed in black hoodies. They looked ridiculous, like children playing cat burglar. I watched them. I watched my son Jerome trip over the rug he had walked on for his entire childhood. I watched Courtney, my daughter-in-law, hiss at him to be quiet, her voice sharp and venomous even in a whisper. They were arguing. "Do not break anything," Jerome whispered, his voice trembling. "If he wakes up, we are dead." "He sleeps like a corpse," Courtney snapped back. "Just find the safe. The loan shark said he needs the money by tomorrow or he takes a finger. Stop shaking and move." They were not here to visit. They were not here to apologize. They were here to rob me. They were here to violate the sanctity of the home that had sheltered them. I watched them move toward the master bedroom. Jerome was sweating. I could smell it, the sour metallic stench of fear. Courtney smelled of expensive perfume and entitlement. I followed them. I stayed 10 feet back, placing my feet carefully on the floorboards I knew would not squeak. It was a tragic parade, a father stalking his son in the dark. I could have stopped them then. I could have turned on the lights and ended it. But I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to know if there was any bottom to their depravity. They entered my bedroom. The beam of their flashlights danced over the bed. It was empty. The sheets were made. "He is not here," Jerome whispered, panic rising in his voice. "Where is he?" "Who cares?" Courtney said. "Maybe he is in the bathroom. Maybe he died in the living room. Just find the wall safe. You said it was behind the painting." I stood in the doorway unseen, merging with the darkness of the hall. I watched them approach the painting of my late wife, Esther. It was a beautiful portrait painted from a photograph taken on our honeymoon. Jerome grabbed the frame. He did not lift it gently. He ripped it off the wall and threw it onto the bed face down. That action hurt more than the robbery. That was my wife, his mother, and he treated her image like trash to get to the cold steel behind it. "There it is," Courtney said. Her voice was full of greed. They stared at the gray metal door of the wall safe. It was an old model, heavy and imposing. I had installed it 20 years ago. They thought it held cash. They thought it held gold bars or bearer bonds. They thought it held their salvation. Jerome pulled a heavy drill from his bag. It was a high-powered, diamond-tipped drill, the kind used for industrial work. He must have stolen it or bought it with the last of his credit. He pressed it against the lock mechanism. "Hurry up," Courtney hissed. Jerome leaned his weight into the drill. The sound was a low, grinding noise, muffled by the heavy steel, but in the silence of the night it sounded like a scream. I watched the sparks fly. I watched the desperation in his shoulders. He was working hard for the first time in his life, but he was working to steal, not to build. It took them 10 minutes. 10 minutes of grinding, sweating, and cursing. I stood there the entire time, my finger resting on the trigger guard of the shotgun, my heart turning into a stone in my chest. Finally, there was a loud crack. The locking mechanism gave way. "Got it!" Jerome gasped. He dropped the drill on the floor. It clattered loudly. "Open it," Courtney commanded. Jerome reached out. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely grip the handle. He pulled. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan of dry hinges. Courtney shined her flashlight into the dark cavity of the safe. They leaned in their heads, bumping together, expecting to see stacks of $100 bills. They expected to see the $3 million they felt entitled to. There was a moment of silence. Absolute crushing silence. Then Courtney let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "What is this?" she shrieked. Jerome reached into the safe. He pulled out the only object inside. It was not money. It was not gold. It was a small framed ultrasound picture. A black and white image of a baby curled up in the womb. It was Layla. He held it up to the flashlight beam. Behind the frame, tucked into the backing, was a single sheet of folded stationery. Jerome unfolded the paper. Courtney snatched it from him and shone the light on the text. Her eyes scanned the words I had written just hours before, knowing they would come. "Read it," Jerome whispered. Courtney's voice shook with rage as she read my handwriting out loud. The note said simply, "You are looking for treasure in a box of steel, but the greatest asset, the only wealth that matters, you left crying at the school gate. This safe is empty because you have already stolen everything that had value." Courtney crumpled the paper and threw it at the open safe. He knew she screamed. He knew we were coming. That sick old man playing games with us. "Where is the money, Jerome? You said it was here. You said he kept cash." "I do not know," Jerome stammered, backing away. "He must have moved it." "He is crazy." "He is not crazy," Courtney yelled, turning on him. "He is laughing at us. We broke in here for a picture. We committed a felony for a sonogram." She kicked the bed frame. She looked around the room, wildly shining her light into the corners, looking for another hiding spot. She looked like a trapped animal. "We have to check under the mattress," she said. "We have to tear this room apart. We cannot leave empty-handed. Marcus will kill you." Jerome was crying now. He sank to the floor, holding the picture of his daughter. "It is over." "Courtney," he sobbed. "He won." "Get up," she hissed. "Get up and search." She grabbed a lamp from the bedside table and smashed it on the floor, shattering the bulb. "I am going to find it," she screamed. "I am going to find every dime if I have to burn this house down to the foundation." I had seen enough. I had seen them desecrate my wife's memory. I had seen them break into my home. I had seen them ignore the message about their own daughter. They were beyond redemption. They were beyond pity. I stepped into the room. I reached out to the wall switch. I flipped the light on. The sudden brightness was blinding. They both spun around, shielding their eyes. I was sitting in the velvet armchair in the corner of the room. I had been there for the last minute, watching them unravel. I had the shotgun resting across my lap. The barrel was pointed at the floor, but my hand was on the grip. "Hello, family," I said. Jerome scrambled backward, crab walking on his hands and feet until his back hit the wall. Courtney froze, her hand still gripping a drawer handle she was about to rip open. Dad, Jerome gasped. "Don't shoot. Please don't shoot." I looked at him. He was pathetic. A grown man cowering in the corner of his father's bedroom. "I am not going to shoot you, Jerome," I said. "I would not waste the shell." Courtney recovered her wits first. She straightened up, trying to regain some semblance of dignity despite the breaking and entering tools at her feet. "You trapped us," she accused. "You set this up." I stood up slowly. I lifted the shotgun. I pumped the slide. The sound was loud. Clack, clack. It was the sound of finality. A shell ejected and a fresh one loaded into the chamber. "I did not trap you," I said. "You walked into this house of your own free will. You broke my window. You destroyed my property. You threatened to burn my house down." I took a step forward. "I called the police 3 minutes ago," I said. "I triggered the silent alarm when you entered the kitchen. They are not coming to take a report. They are coming to make an arrest. The station is 4 blocks away." Jerome's eyes widened. He looked at the window. He heard it then, the faint wail of sirens in the distance, getting louder. "Dad, no," he begged. "You cannot send me to jail. I have a record. They will put me away for years." "You should have thought about that before you picked up a drill," I said. I checked my wristwatch. It was an old Timex, reliable. "You have 10 seconds, I said. What Courtney asked. 10 seconds, I repeated, before the first cruiser turns onto this street. If you are here when they walk through that door, I will press charges for burglary, vandalism, and conspiracy. And I have the security footage to prove it." The sirens were louder now. "Whoop, whoop." 10, I counted. Jerome scrambled to his feet. He looked at Courtney. "Run," he screamed. 9. Courtney hesitated. She looked at the safe one last time as if hoping the money would magically appear. 8. I raised the shotgun barrel slightly. Not at them. Just enough to show them the dark hole at the end. 7. They broke. They ran. They sprinted out of the bedroom, tripping over each other in the hallway. I heard them crashing through the living room. I heard the front door slam open. I heard their footsteps pounding on the pavement outside. I walked to the window. I pulled back the curtain. I watched them running down the street, disappearing into the shadows of the alleyway just as the blue lights of the police cruiser washed over my front lawn. They got away. For now. But they left something behind. They left their dignity. They left their arrogance. And they left the absolute certainty that their father was not a victim. I watched the police officer walk up the path. I unloaded the shotgun and set it down. I went to the front door to greet him. I would tell the police it was a false alarm. I would tell them I heard a noise, but it was nothing. I did not want them arrested tonight, not yet. Jail was too safe for them. I wanted them out on the street. I wanted them dealing with Marcus the loan shark. I wanted them to feel the cold wind of the world without my protection. They had 10 seconds to run. But they could not run from what was coming next. The real punishment was just beginning. The silence after the break-in did not last long. My son Jerome was desperate, and desperate men do not retreat. They escalate. He knew he could not crack my safe. He knew he could not intimidate me with physical violence. So he decided to attack the one thing I could not defend with a shotgun. He decided to attack my mind. It was 2 days after the incident with the drill. I was tired. I had spent 48 hours watching the security monitors, sleeping in 10-minute shifts in my chair. I was running on adrenaline and black coffee. I heard a knock at the door around noon. I checked the camera. It was Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor from 3 houses down. She was a sweet woman, 70 years old, who made the best peach cobbler in the county. She was holding a covered dish. I opened the door, keeping the chain on. Mrs. Higgins smiled, her face wrinkled and kind. I heard about the trouble the other night, Enoch, she said. I saw the police cruiser. I thought you might need some comfort food. It is my beef stew. Extra potatoes, just how you like it. I unlatched the chain. I took the dish. I thanked her. I did not know that 3 hours earlier Jerome had visited her. I did not know he had given her $500 cash, telling her it was for her heart medication, and asked her to deliver the stew because he and I were fighting and I would not take food from him. I did not know that while she was in her kitchen getting a glass of water, he had slipped a crushed cocktail of potent hallucinogens and sedatives into the gravy. He had bought the pills from the same dealer he owed money to. It was a chemical weapon disguised as neighborly love. I sat at my kitchen table. The stew smelled delicious. I was starving. I ate 2 bowls. 20 minutes later, the room began to tilt. It started with the sound of the refrigerator hum. It got louder and louder until it sounded like a jet engine taking off in my kitchen. Then the colors started to bleed. The yellow walls turned a sickly green. The floorboards began to ripple like water. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. I stumbled. I grabbed the table, but my hand passed right through it, or so my drugged brain thought. I fell to the floor. The ceiling fan was spinning, but it wasn't a fan anymore. It was a giant eye staring down at me. I tried to crawl to my phone. I needed to call Katz. I needed to call for help, but the phone turned into a snake. It coiled around my wrist, biting me. I screamed. The hallucinations became violent. I saw men coming through the windows, shadow men with knives. They looked like the loan sharks. They looked like Jerome. I grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the side table. I swung it at the shadows. I smashed a window. I overturned the coffee table. I was fighting for my life against ghosts. I did not know I was screaming at the top of my lungs. I did not know I was destroying the home I loved. I only knew that I was under attack and I had to defend myself. Then the front door burst open. It was not the shadow men. It was the police, and behind them were the paramedics. And behind them, standing in the doorway with a look of pure manufactured grief, was Jerome. I swung the lamp at the first officer. I saw him as a demon. He dodged. "He is having an episode," Jerome shouted. "Grab him before he hurts himself." 2 officers tackled me. I fought with the strength of a man who believes he is about to be murdered. I kicked. I bit. I roared. But the drugs had weakened me. They pinned me to the floor. I felt the cold steel of handcuffs ratcheting tight around my wrists. They dragged me up. I looked at Jerome. The room was still spinning, but his face was clear. He was crying, but his eyes were dry. "I am so sorry, officers," Jerome sobbed. "He has been getting worse. The dementia. He thinks everyone is trying to kill him. I tried to get him to take his meds, but he refuses. He is a danger to the neighborhood. Look at what he did to the house. I tried to speak. I tried to tell them about the stew. I tried to tell them about the poison. But my words came out as a slur. My tongue felt too big for my mouth. I was drooling. I looked exactly like what Jerome said I was. A madman. We have to take him in for a 72-hour hold, the officer said. He is a threat to public safety. Please, Jerome said, put him somewhere safe. I cannot care for him here. He needs a facility. I will sign the papers. I am his son. I just want him to get help. He signed the involuntary commitment order right there on my kitchen table, moving aside the broken glass of the window I had smashed. He signed away my freedom with a flourish. The paramedics strapped me to a gurney. As they wheeled me out, Jerome leaned over me. He pretended to brush hair off my forehead. You should have just given me the money, Dad, he whispered. Now you lose everything, and you are going to die in a padded room thinking you lost your mind. He smiled. It was the smile of the devil himself. They loaded me into the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. The siren wailed, matching the screaming in my own head. I passed out. I woke up in a white room. The light was harsh and fluorescent. It hummed, but it was a normal hum, not a jet engine. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. My mouth tasted like copper and ash. I tried to move my hands. I couldn't. My wrists were strapped to the metal rails of the hospital bed with thick leather restraints. My ankles were bound too. I was helpless. Panic surged in my chest. I pulled against the straps. The leather creaked. Mr. Freeman, a voice said, "Calm down. You are safe." I turned my head. A man in a white coat was standing by the bed. He was tall, with graying hair and glasses. He was holding a clipboard. He looked at me not with the condescension of a doctor treating a lunatic, but with the sharp focus of a professional. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision. I recognized him. Dr. Vance, I rasped. My throat was dry as sandpaper. Dr. Vance put a finger to his lips. He walked over to the door and closed it firmly. He checked the small window to make sure no one was watching. Then he walked back to my bedside. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He unlocked the restraint on my right hand, then my left. Katz called me, Dr. Vance whispered. He triggered the medical protocol the moment the police scanner picked up the disturbance at your address. I intercepted your admission paperwork. I am the chief of psychiatry here. You are under my care now. I rubbed my wrists. I felt tears prick my eyes. I was not alone. The network I had built, the favors I had banked over 40 years, they were working. Jerome, I said. He poisoned me. I know, Dr. Vance said. He held up a vial of dark red liquid. We drew your blood the moment you arrived before the saline drip diluted your system. We ran a full toxicology screen. You had enough scopolamine and benzodiazepines in your system to knock out a horse. It was not dementia, Enoch. It was attempted murder. He put the vial in a sealed evidence bag. He signed the seal. This is going to the private lab, he said. The chain of custody is unbreakable. This is your silver bullet, but we have to play this carefully. What do you mean? I asked, sitting up. Jerome thinks he won, Dr. Vance said. He has the temporary guardianship papers. He used the emergency order to gain access to your home. He thinks you are locked away in the state ward, heavily sedated. If we release you now, he runs. He destroys evidence. I understood. I had to stay dead to catch the grave robber. Where is he now? I asked. Dr. Vance pulled out his tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. It was connected to the security feed in my house. The feed Jerome thought he had disabled, but which ran on a redundant backup system he knew nothing about. I watched the screen. Jerome and Courtney were in my living room. They were drinking champagne. They were laughing. They had pushed my favorite armchair into the corner and replaced it with a white modern sofa they must have rented or bought on credit. Courtney was walking around the room touching things. She picked up the brass carburetor I had been polishing. She made a face of disgust and threw it in the trash can. It is finally ours, she said. The old bastard is gone. Jerome took a sip of his drink. He kicked a piece of the broken lamp I had smashed. We need to find the deeds, he said. He has land. I know he has land. We tear this place apart until we find the paperwork. Then we sell it all. The house, the lot, everything. I watched them desecrate my home. I watched them celebrate my incarceration. They were like vultures picking at a carcass before the heart had even stopped beating. Can I leave? I asked Dr. Vance. Not yet, he said. You need to recover. The drugs took a toll on your heart. You need 24 hours of observation. Besides, Katz is preparing the legal injunction. We need to let them commit the crime fully. We need to let them sell something or sign a document they have no right to sign. That upgrades the charge from attempted fraud to grand larceny. So, I have to wait, I said, lying back against the pillow. You have to wait. Dr. Vance agreed. But you are not helpless. You have a front row seat to their destruction. He handed me the tablet. Watch them, Enoch. Let your anger keep you alive. I took the tablet. I watched Jerome open my desk drawers. I watched him dump my papers on the floor. I watched him searching for a fortune that I had moved to an offshore trust 10 years ago. He was looking for gold in a coal mine. I lay in the hospital bed, the straps hanging loose at my sides. I was a prisoner by choice now. I watched my son destroy my house, and with every item he broke, he added another year to his prison sentence. Enjoy the champagne, Jerome, I whispered to the screen. It is the last drink you will ever have as a free man. I closed my eyes and let the residual drugs pull me into sleep. But it was not a nightmare this time. It was a dream of justice. And when I woke up, I would bring the hammer down. I lay in the hospital bed with the heart monitor beeping a slow, steady rhythm beside me, but my pulse was anything but calm because I was holding the tablet Dr. Vance had given me, and I was watching my life being dismantled in high definition. The security feed from my living room was crisp and clear, showing a scene that made my stomach churn with a mixture of rage and sorrow. Jerome and Courtney were celebrating. They had turned my sanctuary, the home I had built with my own hands and filled with memories of my late wife, into a party house for two. They had ordered pizza and expensive champagne using one of the credit cards they had found in a drawer I purposely left unlocked. The music was blaring so loud the bass vibrated the camera lens. Courtney was dancing on my coffee table, her heels digging gouges into the wood I had sanded myself 40 years ago. She was laughing, a shrill, triumphant sound that echoed off the walls. Jerome was sitting in my recliner, his feet propped up on the mantelpiece right where Esther's urn used to sit before I hid it in the basement. He was smoking a cigar ash falling onto the carpet, indifferent to the burn marks he was creating. To them, this was victory. They thought the old man was locked away in a padded room, sedated and helpless. They thought they had won the war without firing a shot. They were talking about renovations. Courtney wanted to knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room to create an open concept flow. Jerome wanted to turn my study, the room where I had quietly built an empire, into a gaming lounge. Hearing them plan the erasure of my existence while I was still breathing was a torture I would not wish on my worst enemy. But the celebration quickly turned into something darker. The champagne ran dry, and the reality of their situation began to creep back in. The loan sharks were still waiting. The $3 million debt had not vanished just because they had institutionalized me. They needed cash, and they needed it now. I saw Jerome stand up abruptly, kicking over an empty bottle. He started pacing the room, his eyes darting around wildly. The paranoia of the desperate was setting in. "It has to be here," he shouted over the music. "He does not use banks, not for the big stuff. He is old school. He keeps it in the walls. I know he does. I remember when I was a kid, he was always working on the drywall in the hallway." Courtney jumped down from the table, stumbling slightly. "You are right," she said, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Old people always hoard cash. It is probably taped behind the baseboards or stuffed in the insulation. We just have to look harder." They went to the garage and came back with tools. Jerome held a sledgehammer. Courtney had a crowbar. I watched in horror as they began to destroy my home. Jerome swung the hammer into the plaster of the living room wall. Dust exploded into the air. He swung again and again, tearing gaping holes in the sheetrock. He reached into the wall, feeling around for bundles of cash, pulling out fistfuls of pink insulation and throwing them on the floor in frustration. "Nothing," he screamed. "Check the bedroom," Courtney yelled, ripping a baseboard off the wall with the crowbar. The sound of splitting wood was like a scream. They moved from room to room, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. They smashed the tiles in the bathroom. They tore up the floorboards in the guest room. They were not just looking for money anymore. They were punishing the house for not giving up its secrets. They were punishing me. It was a frenzy of violence fueled by greed and fear. My house, which had stood strong against storms and time, was being torn apart from the inside by the very people it was meant to shelter. I watched their sweaty, dusty faces contorted with rage, and I realized they were not just thieves. They were vandals of the soul. They eventually made their way to my study. This was the room I had protected the most. It was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with manuals, history books, and engineering texts. It smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. Jerome stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, the sledgehammer hanging from his hand. "It has to be here," he panted. "This is where he spends all his time. This is where he hides." He walked over to the main bookshelf, the one that covered the entire north wall. He ran his hand along the spines of the books, not reading the titles, just looking for a hollow sound. He started pulling books off the shelves, throwing them onto the floor. My first editions, my technical manuals. He treated them like garbage. He swung the hammer at the wood. The shelf splintered. He hit it again and again. The wood cracked and groaned. He ripped a shelf out, throwing it behind him. Then he stopped. He tapped the wall behind where the shelf had been. It did not sound like drywall. It did not sound like wood. It sounded solid, heavy, metallic. "Courtney, come here," he whispered. She ran over. He pointed to the exposed wall. There was a seam, a faint vertical line running through the back of the bookcase. It was not a wall, it was a door. They had found it. I gripped the tablet so hard my knuckles turned white. They had found the one thing I had kept hidden for 30 years. The mechanism was simple but hidden well. A false back triggered by a magnetic lock. Jerome did not have the magnet key, but he had a sledgehammer, and he had no respect for craftsmanship. He jammed the crowbar into the seam. He leaned his entire weight against it. The metal groaned. The lock was strong, but the wood frame around it was not designed to withstand a brute force attack. With a loud crack, the wood gave way. The false bookcase swung outward, revealing a dark, narrow staircase descending into the earth. Jerome and Courtney stood frozen, staring into the abyss. Cool air rushed up from the darkness, carrying the scent of ozone and electricity. It was not the smell of a damp root cellar. It was the smell of a machine room. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with shock and anticipation. "This is it," Courtney whispered. "This is the vault. This is where the gold is." They did not hesitate. They did not stop to think why a retired mechanic would have a reinforced bunker under his house. Greed is a powerful blinder. They turned on the flashlights on their phones and stepped into the darkness. I switched the camera feed on my tablet to the basement cameras. The image switched to night vision green, then flared into full color as the motion sensors in the basement triggered the overhead LED strips. They reached the bottom of the stairs, expecting to see stacks of cash or bars of gold. Instead, they stepped into a room that looked like the bridge of a spaceship. The walls were lined with server racks, the lights blinking in a hypnotic rhythm of green and blue. In the center of the room was a massive U-shaped desk dominated by 6 high-resolution monitors. The screens were alive with data. One showed a real-time map of the United States with hundreds of little moving dots. Another showed the live feed from the port of Savannah tracking shipping containers. Another scrolled through stock market tickers and logistics algorithms. This was the nerve center of Freeman Logistics. This was where I managed a fleet of 400 trucks and 3 million square feet of warehousing. This was the brain of the beast. Jerome dropped the sledgehammer. It hit the polished concrete floor with a clang that echoed through the room. He walked toward the desk, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the maps. He looked at the company logo spinning on the main screen, the same logo he had seen on trucks on the highway 1,000 times but never connected to his father. "What is this?" Courtney breathed, looking around in confusion. "Where is the money?" Jerome did not answer. He was staring at a framed photograph on the desk. It was a picture of me shaking hands with the governor standing in front of a new distribution center. The caption on the brass plaque read, "Enoch Freeman, founder and CEO, Entrepreneur of the Year." "He is not a mechanic," Jerome whispered, his voice trembling. "He never was." He picked up a file from the desk. It was labeled Annual Revenue Projection. He opened it. His eyes scanned the numbers. "He isn't rich," Courtney Jerome said, dropping the file. "He is an empire." He looked at the screens again. He saw the dots moving. Each dot was a truck. Each truck was revenue. He saw the sheer scale of what I had built while he was playing video games and complaining about his allowance. He realized in that moment that he had been starving in a pantry full of food because he was too lazy to open the door. He collapsed into the ergonomic leather chair behind the desk. "My chair," He spun around looking at the screens, overwhelmed by the complexity and the power of the room. He looked at his hands, the hands that had never done a day of hard work, and then he looked at the empire his father had built with grease and sweat. Suddenly the red phone on the desk rang. It was an old-fashioned landline, a direct hardline I kept for emergencies. The sound was loud and shrill in the hum of the server room. Jerome jumped. He stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. "Answer it," Courtney whispered, terrified. Jerome reached out a shaking hand. He lifted the receiver. He put it to his ear. He did not say anything. He just listened. I spoke into my phone from the hospital bed, my voice cold and hard. "Hello, son." "Dad." Jerome gasped. I watched him on the screen. He looked small in my chair. He looked like a child who had snuck into the cockpit of a jet. "Do not touch my keyboard, Jerome," I said. "You do not have the clearance. And you certainly do not have the brains." "Dad, please," he sobbed. "I did not know. I swear I did not know." "You did not want to know," I replied. "You only saw what you wanted to see. You saw a dirty mechanic because it made you feel superior. Now you see the truth." Courtney grabbed the phone from him. "Enoch," she screamed. "We are family. You have billions. You can fix this. Just transfer the money. We will leave. We will never bother you again." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You still do not get it." "Courtney," I said. "This is not a bank vault. This is a place of work. And you two are trespassing." I pressed a button on my tablet. The lights in the basement turned red. A siren began to wail, a low pulsing sound that signaled a security breach. "The Halon fire suppression system is armed." I lied. "You have 30 seconds before the room seals itself. Get out of my office." They dropped the phone. They ran. They scrambled up the stairs, tripping over each other in their panic. I watched them go. I watched them flee from the truth they had sought so desperately. I hung up the phone. I lay back against the hospital pillows. My house was broken. My walls were smashed. But my secret was out. And now that they knew exactly what they had lost, the real suffering would begin. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old lies. I sat at the defendant's table next to Kat's, my hands folded on the polished wood. My suit was pressed, my tie was straight, but I felt like a man standing on a gallows waiting for the trap door to open. Across the aisle, Jerome and Courtney sat with their lawyer, a man named Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my first house. They looked like the picture of grieving, concerned children. Courtney was dabbing her eyes with a tissue that was perfectly dry. Jerome was staring at the floor, shaking his head as if the weight of my supposed illness was too much for him to bear. The hearing for emergency guardianship was underway. To the outside world, this was a tragedy. A son trying to save his father from the ravages of dementia. To me, it was an execution. Sterling stood up. He walked toward the judge, a stern woman named Judge Holloway, who looked like she had seen every variety of human misery and had no patience for any of it. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil, "we are not here to punish Mr. Freeman. We are here to protect him. The evidence is clear. We have statements from neighbors who have seen him wandering the streets in a rage. We have the police report from the night he destroyed his own living room in a psychotic break. We have the testimony of his loving family who only want to ensure he does not hurt himself or others." He placed a thick stack of papers on the judge's bench. These were the fabrications, the twisted truths, the lies they had manufactured while I was watching from my hospital bed. Then he called Courtney to the stand. She walked up looking small and fragile. She had toned down her makeup. She wore a modest blue dress. She looked like a saint. "Mrs. Freeman," Sterling asked softly, "tell the court about Enoch's condition." Courtney sniffled. She looked at me with wide, fearful eyes. "It started a few months ago," she lied, her voice trembling. "He would forget names. He would leave the stove on. But then it got violent. He started accusing us of stealing. He started hoarding trash. The other night when the police came, he didn't even know who Jerome was. He tried to hit him with a lamp. We are just so scared. We do not want him to die alone in that house." She broke down into sobbing tears. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. I watched the judge. Her expression softened. She looked at Courtney with sympathy. Then she looked at me. I saw the judgment in her eyes. She saw an old, confused man who was a danger to society. She saw a burden that needed to be managed. Jerome sat at his table, hiding a smirk behind his hand. He thought he had won. He thought the narrative was set in stone. Sterling rested his case. He looked at Katz with a smug grin. "Your witness," he said. Katz stood up. He did not rush. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the center of the room. He did not look at Courtney. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," Katz said, his voice deep and resonant. "The petitioners have painted a very vivid picture of a man in decline. They claim my client is suffering from dementia. They claim he is paranoid. They claim he is dangerous." He paused. He walked over to our table and picked up a laptop. However, Katz continued, "There is a difference between paranoia and persecution. Paranoia is believing people are out to get you when they are not. Persecution is when they actually are." Sterling jumped up. "Objection. Relevance." The judge waved him down. "Overruled. I want to hear where this is going." Katz connected the laptop to the courtroom's large monitor. The screen flickered to life. "We would like to submit Exhibit A," Katz said. "This footage was taken from a security camera inside Mr. Freeman's kitchen 3 days ago, the same day the police were called. On the screen, the image was crisp and clear, high definition. It showed Mrs. Higgins, my neighbor, standing in my kitchen holding the bowl of stew. But then the angle shifted to the previous timestamp. It showed Jerome standing on Mrs. Higgins' porch handing her a stack of cash. Then it cut to another angle, a hidden camera I had installed in the flower pot on my own porch. It showed Jerome taking the bowl from Mrs. Higgins for a second while she tied her shoe. It showed him pulling a small paper packet from his pocket. It showed him dumping a white powder into the gravy and stirring it with his finger. The courtroom went silent. Absolute vacuum, sealed silence. Courtney stopped crying. Her mouth hung open. Jerome went pale, his skin turning a sickly shade of gray. Katz did not stop there. "Exhibit B," he said. The video changed. It was the night vision footage from my bedroom. It showed Jerome and Courtney breaking in. It showed the drill. It showed them ripping the picture of my late wife off the wall. It showed Courtney screaming about the money. It showed them running like cowards when I turned on the lights. "This does not look like a family concerned about a senile old man," Katz said, his voice hard. "This looks like a burglary." Sterling was standing now, stammering. "Your Honor, this footage is inadmissible. We do not know the provenance. It could be deep-faked." Katz slammed a file onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "And this," Katz roared, pointing at the file. "This is the toxicology report from Atlanta General Hospital taken 2 hours after Mr. Freeman was admitted. It shows lethal levels of scopolamine and benzodiazepines in his blood, the same substances found in the residue on the bowl recovered from the trash." He turned to Jerome. He pointed a finger at him like a weapon. "You did not try to help your father," Katz said. "You tried to poison him. You induced a psychotic break to have him committed so you could loot his estate." The judge was reading the toxicology report. Her face had changed. The sympathy was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury. She looked at Jerome and Courtney. They looked like rats caught in a trap, shrinking under the glare of the lights. Jerome stood up, knocking his chair over. "It is a lie," he shouted. "He set us up. He is crazy. Sit down," the judge barked. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down and shut up before I have you gagged." Jerome collapsed into his chair. Courtney was shaking, gripping his arm, her fingernails digging into his suit jacket. Katz looked at me. He nodded. It was my turn. I stood up. I did not need a cane. I did not need help. I walked to the stand. I swore on the Bible. I sat down and looked at my son. "Mr. Freeman," the judge said, her voice softer now. "Do you have anything to add?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. I looked at the gallery. I looked at the bailiff. Then I looked at Jerome. "My son claims he did this out of love," I said. "He claims he wanted to protect me. But love does not drug a father. Love does not break into a home. Love does not destroy a legacy." I took a breath. "He did not do this because I am sick," I said. "He did this because he is in debt." I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was the report from my private investigator. "Jerome Freeman owes $3 million to the Rojas cartel," I said loudly. "It is gambling debt and drug debt. He has 24 hours to pay it. That is why he is here. He does not want guardianship to take care of me. He wants guardianship to liquidate my assets to save his own life." The courtroom erupted. Reporters in the back row started typing furiously. Sterling looked at his clients with horror, realizing he had been used. Jerome put his head in his hands. "Order," the judge shouted, banging her gavel. "Order in this court." She looked at Jerome. "Is this true?" she asked. Jerome did not answer. He just rocked back and forth. The judge looked at the evidence. She looked at the video still frozen on the screen of Jerome poisoning my food. She looked at the toxicology report. She closed the file. "The petition for emergency guardianship is denied with prejudice," she ruled. "Furthermore, based on the evidence presented here today, I am issuing an immediate and permanent restraining order against Jerome Freeman and Courtney Freeman. You are to have no contact with Enoch Freeman. You are not to come within 500 feet of his person, his home, or his property." She turned to the bailiff. "Take them into custody," she said. "I am referring this evidence to the district attorney. I see probable cause for charges of attempted murder, burglary, and elder abuse." "No," Courtney screamed. She lunged toward the bench. "We have kids. You cannot do this." "He made me do it." The bailiff grabbed her. Another officer grabbed Jerome. They handcuffed them right there in the courtroom. The sound of the cuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. But as they were dragging Jerome away, he stopped. He looked at me. His eyes were wild. He was not looking at a father anymore. He was looking at the man who had signed his death warrant. "You killed me!" he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "You killed me! They are going to find me. And when they do, it is on you." I looked at him. I did not blink. "You killed yourself, son," I said. "I just bought the tombstone." They dragged him out the side door. The heavy wood slammed shut, cutting off his screams. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "I am so sorry." I nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." I walked out of the courtroom. Katz walked beside me. We did not celebrate. There was no joy in this victory. I had put my son in jail, but I knew the monster was still out there. The $3 million debt had not disappeared. Jerome was in police custody, which meant he was safe for now. But bail would be set, and if he got out, or if the cartel decided to send a message, the war would enter a new phase. I walked out into the bright Atlanta sun. I took a deep breath. I was free. I was competent. I was vindicated. But as I walked to my truck, I checked the shadows. I checked the mirrors. Because I knew that a wounded animal is dangerous, but a wounded animal with a debt to the devil is lethal. And Jerome was not done yet. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. Courtney clearly never learned that definition, despite the court order, despite the frozen accounts, and despite the public humiliation. She decided to double down on her delusion. She believed that perception was reality, and if she could just convince the world she was still rich and successful, then the money would somehow magically reappear. She rented a mansion in Buckhead for her 30th birthday bash. She called it the Phoenix Rising Party. A not-so-subtle dig at me, implying she was rising from the ashes of my so-called persecution. What she did not know was that the mansion she rented belonged to a holding company called Obsidian Properties, which was a subsidiary of Freeman Logistics. She was paying me to host her own funeral. I watched the security feed from my office, not with anger, but with the cold detachment of a judge watching a guilty man tie his own noose. The party was an exercise in vanity. There were ice sculptures shaped like swans, a champagne tower that reached the ceiling, and a DJ who cost more than a teacher makes in a month. Courtney was the center of attention, wearing a diamond-encrusted gown that glittered under the strobe lights. She was holding her phone up, live streaming to her followers, spinning a web of lies with every breath. "Hey guys," she shouted over the thumping bass. "Thank you so much for the support. We won the court case. Obviously the truth always comes out. My crazy father-in-law tried to ruin us, but we are stronger than ever. Look at this place. This is what resilience looks like." She panned the camera around the room, showing off the guests, most of whom were fair-weather friends and hangers-on, who were just there for the free top-shelf liquor. Jerome was in the background, wearing a tuxedo that was a size too small, looking nervous and sweaty. He knew the truth. He knew they were spending money. They did not have using a credit card they found in an old wallet of mine that I had left active for exactly this purpose. It was a trap, a honeypot designed to catch a bear, and the bear had walked right in. Courtney continued her monologue, her voice shrill and manic. "We are launching a new lifestyle brand next week." She lied, her eyes wide and desperate. "We have investors lined up. We are going to build an empire, and to all the haters who believe the lies, enjoy watching me shine." She toasted the camera, taking a long swig of champagne. She looked invincible. She looked triumphant. She looked like a woman standing on the tracks, staring down a freight train, believing she could stop it with a smile. I picked up my phone and called Katz. "Execute the warrant," I said. At the mansion, the music cut out abruptly. The silence that followed was jarring. The guests looked around confused, thinking it was part of the show. The front doors flew open with a bang that shook the windows. 6 uniformed officers marched in, followed by 2 men in dark suits and a team of movers holding large plastic bins. Courtney dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor, sending shards of crystal and liquid everywhere. She stared at the intruders, her face draining of all color. "What is this?" she screamed, trying to regain control. "Get out! This is a private party!" One of the men in suits stepped forward. It was an associate of Katz. He held up a piece of paper. "Mrs. Freeman," he said, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "I am here to execute a seizure order for stolen property and assets purchased through credit card fraud," she shrieked. "That card is authorized. It is a family card. The card belongs to Freeman Logistics," the lawyer corrected calmly. "It is for corporate expenses. Only you have charged $50,000 of jewelry, clothing, and party supplies to it in the last 48 hours. That is grand larceny. And since the items were purchased with stolen funds, they are evidence." He signaled to the officers, "Seize it all." The room erupted. Into chaos, the officers moved with efficiency. They were not there to arrest her, yet they were there to strip her of her costume. The movers began grabbing the gift bags, the expensive electronics, the decorations that had been charged to the card. But then they turned to Courtney. "Ma'am," the lawyer said, looking at her diamond necklace and the bracelet on her wrist. "Those items were purchased yesterday at Tiffany's, using the stolen card. Hand them over." "No!" she yelled, clutching her neck. "These are mine, officer," the lawyer said. A female officer stepped forward. She did not look amused. She grabbed Courtney's arm. "Hand over the jewelry." "Ma'am, or I will remove it myself," Courtney screamed as she was forced to unclasp the necklace. She threw it at the officer, tears streaming down her face. Her guests, the people she was trying so hard to impress, were backing away, pulling out their phones not to help her but to record the spectacle. "The dress, too," the lawyer said, checking his list. "That is a Balmain gown. That is a purchase this morning, $10,000. It is proceeds of crime." "You cannot take my dress," she wailed. "I am wearing it." "We can provide you with an evidence bag or a robe," the officer said, "but that dress is coming with us." The humiliation was absolute right there in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by the ruins of her party. Courtney was forced to unzip the dress. She was left standing in her expensive shapewear, sobbing uncontrollably, as the officer bagged the gown like it was a piece of trash. Jerome tried to intervene, but an officer put a hand on his chest and told him to sit down or be arrested for obstruction. He sat down, cowering, watching his wife being dismantled piece by piece. "Get them out of here," the lawyer commanded, pointing to the door. "The lease on this property is void due to criminal activity on the premises. Vacate immediately." The guests did not need to be told. Twice they fled like rats from a sinking ship, leaving Courtney and Jerome alone in the center of the room. Surrounded by the wreckage of their vanity, Courtney was dragged toward the door. She was kicking and screaming, trying to grab onto the door frame, trying to hold onto the fantasy that was slipping through her fingers. She was thrown out onto the front lawn, the wet grass staining her silk slip, the cool night air biting her skin. But the worst part was not the cold, it was the phone. Her phone, which she had dropped when the police arrived, was still propped up against a centerpiece on a table near the door. It was still streaming. The battery was strong. The connection was good, and the camera was pointed directly at the open door, framing Courtney as she lay in the dirt. The comments section was scrolling so fast it was a blur, but I could read enough of them to know it was over. "She is a thief. Look at her fake crying. So much for the empire. This is the best reality show ever. Karma is real." Courtney looked up and saw the phone. She realized with a jolt of horror that 5,000 people had just watched her get stripped and evicted. She scrambled toward it, crawling on her hands and knees in the mud. She grabbed the device, her hands shaking so bad she dropped it twice. "Stop watching," she screamed into the camera, her face distorted by mascara and snot. "Stop watching me." She tried to end the stream, but her fingers were slippery with mud and tears. She fumbled with the screen, hitting buttons randomly instead of ending it. She accidentally switched the camera to front-facing view, zooming in on her own ravaged face. The light from the screen illuminated the panic in her eyes. the absolute terror of a narcissist who has lost her reflection. Finally, the screen went black. She threw the phone into the bushes and let out a primal scream of rage. She had lost the jewelry. She had lost the dress. She had lost the house, but more importantly, she had lost the audience. She was no longer an influencer. She was a cautionary tale. She was a meme. Jerome walked out of the house holding a single shoe. He looked at his wife shivering in the grass. He looked at the empty driveway where his friends had parked. He looked at the dark windows of the mansion they had pretended to own. "It is over, Courtney," he whispered. She looked up at him, her eyes burning with hatred. "It is not over," she hissed, spitting mud from her lips. "Your father thinks he can shame me. He thinks he can break me. But he forgot one thing." "What?" Jerome asked wearily. "He forgot that I have nothing left to lose," she said, standing up, her legs shaking but her voice steady and dangerous, and people with nothing to lose are capable of anything. I watched from my office monitor as the feed cut out. I sat back in my chair. The satisfaction was there, but it was bitter. I had stripped them of their assets. I had stripped them of their pride, but I had not broken their spirit. Not yet. I had backed them into a corner, and I knew that the next move would not be financial or legal, it would be violent. Courtney was right. She had nothing left to lose, except her freedom, and she was about to throw that away too. I closed my laptop. I checked the load in my shotgun again. I knew they were not going to go quietly into the night. The final act was coming, and it was going to be blood for blood. The silence of my victory did not last long because a man who owes $3 million to the cartel does not sleep, and neither do his creditors. Jerome was released on bail 24 hours after his arrest. I had expected this. I knew the legal system moved slow, but the underworld moved fast. I sat in my fortified living room, cleaning my glasses, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I did not know that while I was drinking my coffee, my son was being dragged into a van 3 blocks from the county jail. I learned the details later from the police report and the bloodstains found in the back of a transmission shop in Decatur. The Rojas brothers were not interested in excuses. They tied Jerome to a chair. They did not ask him for the money again. They simply took his left hand, splayed it on a workbench, and used a pair of rusty garden shears to remove his pinky finger. The scream must have been deafening, but in that soundproofed room, no one heard a thing. They cauterized the wound with a soldering iron and woke him up with a bucket of ice water. The leader, a man named Carlos, leaned close to Jerome's sweating gray face and whispered, "You have 6 hours. Bring us the girl, or bring us the money. If you don't, the next thing we take is your eyes." Jerome broke completely. In that moment, the last shred of humanity he possessed, the tiny spark of decency that might have existed somewhere deep inside him, was extinguished by pain and terror. He was no longer a father. He was no longer a son. He was a desperate animal willing to do anything to survive. He looked at his mutilated hand wrapped in a dirty rag, and he made a decision that would damn him for eternity. He decided that his daughter's life was a fair price to pay for his own. He stumbled out of the shop. Blinded by pain and fear, he stole a car from a gas station parking lot. A beat-up sedan left running by a careless driver, he drove toward the private school in Buckhead, his eyes wild, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was not thinking about the trauma he was about to inflict. He was only thinking about the clock ticking down in his head. I was at home reviewing security protocols when my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the tracking app I had secretly installed on Layla's phone months ago, disguised as a game. Usually she was in the geography wing at this hour, but the dot was moving. It was moving fast across the parking lot toward the main road. My stomach dropped. I switched to the school's security feed, which I had access to thanks to a substantial donation I made the previous year. I saw the grainy footage of a man in a hoodie limping toward the playground fence. It was recess. The children were running around laughing, oblivious to the monster lurking at the perimeter. I saw Layla. She was playing near the swings. The man whistled. She looked up. She recognized him even through the hoodie and the distance she ran toward the fence, smiling. She thought it was her daddy coming to surprise her. She did not see the blood on his shirt. She did not see the madness in his eyes. Jerome reached over the low fence. He did not hug her. He grabbed her by the collar of her uniform and hoisted her over the metal bars like a sack of flour. Layla started to kick. She started to scream. I watched in helpless horror as other teachers turned and started running, but they were too far away. Jerome threw her into the back seat of the stolen sedan and sped off. tires smoking, leaving a cloud of dust and a group of terrified children in his wake. My phone rang seconds later. It was an unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. I did not say hello. I just listened. Dad. Jerome's voice was unrecognizable. It was a wet, gurgling sound, high-pitched with hysteria. I have her. I have Layla. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute. It was the absence of all emotion except one focus. Where are you? Jerome, I asked, my voice steady. It does not matter, he screamed. Bring the money. $3 million cash. I know you have it in that basement. Bring it to the old textile factory on the west side. You know the one with the collapsed roof. I know it, I said. Come alone, he rasped. If I see a cop, if I see a drone, I will kill her. I swear to God, Dad, I will kill her. I have nothing left to lose. Look at what they did to me. I heard Layla crying in the background. Grandpa, please help me. Daddy is hurting me. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone. The silence of the house pressed in on me, screaming in my ears. A normal man would call 911. A normal man would trust the authorities to handle a kidnapping and hostage situation, but I knew the police. I knew they would set up a perimeter. They would bring in negotiators. They would wait. And in that time, Jerome would snap, or the cartel would arrive and burn the place down with my granddaughter inside. I could not risk it. Jerome was right about one thing. I had nothing left to lose either, except Layla. I walked to the basement. I did not go to the computer terminal. This time, I went to the back wall behind the server racks. I pressed a panel, and a hidden compartment clicked open. Inside was a footlocker, green steel, dented and scratched. It was a relic from a life I had left behind 40 years ago, a life before logistics, before Atlanta, before I was Enoch the mechanic. I opened the locker. The smell of gun oil and old canvas wafted up. I took out the vest. It was heavy, lined with ceramic plates. I put it on, tightening the Velcro straps over my flannel shirt. It felt familiar, like a second skin. I took out the boots, heavy combat boots with steel toes, and laced them up tight. Then I reached for the weapon. It was not a hunting rifle. It was a Benelli M4 tactical shotgun, matte black with a pistol grip. I had modified it myself. Years ago, I loaded the tube with slugs, heavy lead rounds that could punch through an engine block. I pumped the action. The sound was a mechanical promise of violence. I grabbed a sidearm, a 1911 pistol, and tucked it into the holster on the vest. I grabbed a knife, a 6-inch blade with a serrated edge, and strapped it to my boot. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor of the server rack. I did not see an old man. I did not see a victim. I saw a soldier who had been called back to war. I saw the man who had survived jungles and deserts, the man who had built an empire with his bare hands and who was now going to dismantle his greatest mistake. I walked out of the house. I did not take the truck. I took the black sedan I kept in the back of the garage, the one with the reinforced chassis and the bulletproof glass. I drove toward the west side, toward the decaying industrial district where the city dumped its trash and its secrets. I drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand on the shotgun. I was not angry anymore. Anger is a distraction. I was cold. I was precise. I was a machine built for one purpose: to retrieve my granddaughter and to end this nightmare once and for all. Jerome thought he was dealing with his father. He thought he was dealing with a businessman. He forgot that before I was any of those things, I was a man who knew how to clear a room. He had invited the devil to dinner, and he was about to find out that the devil brought his own cutlery. I pulled up to the perimeter of the old factory. I killed the headlights. I rolled the car into the shadows of a collapsed wall. I got out, checking my gear. The air smelled of rust and rain. I moved toward the main building, silent as a shadow, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. I heard a scream from inside. It was Layla. I did not run. Running makes noise. I moved with a predator's grace toward the entrance. I racked the shotgun one last time. I am coming. Layla, I whispered into the darkness. And God help anyone who stands in my way. The stolen sedan tore out of the school parking lot with a screech of burning rubber that left black marks on the pavement and a permanent scar on my granddaughter's soul. Jerome threw Layla into the back seat like she was a piece of luggage, not his child. She scrambled up, her little hands gripping the torn upholstery of the strange car, her eyes wide with a terror that no 10-year-old should ever know. She looked at the back of her father's head. expecting him to turn around and smile, expecting him to tell her it was a game, a drill, a mistake. But he did not turn around. He just gripped the steering wheel with his good hand and his mutilated one, leaving smears of fresh blood on the plastic rim. "Daddy," she whimpered, her voice trembling. "Please slow down. Where are we going? Why are you driving like this? I left my backpack at school." "Shut up!" Jerome screamed. He did not look at her. He stared at the road, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every 2 seconds, checking for police. Checking for me. Checking for the demons that were chasing him. "Shut up, Layla. I am trying to think." Layla shrank back against the door. She saw the blood soaking through the bandage on his hand. She saw the sweat pouring down his neck. She saw the gun sitting on the passenger seat, a dark metal object that vibrated with the hum of the engine. She realized then, with a clarity that broke her heart, that the man driving the car was not the father who used to push her on the swings. He was a stranger, wearing her father's face. "You are hurting me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You are scaring me. Are you going to hurt Grandpa?" Jerome laughed, a dry, hysterical sound that sounded like glass breaking in a disposal. "Hurt him," he shouted. "He is the one hurting us, Layla. He is the one who did this to me. Look at my hand. Look at it." He waved his bandaged hand in the air, blood seeping through the rag. Layla screamed. She covered her eyes. She wanted to go home. She wanted her room. She wanted me, but they were moving further and further away from safety. They were driving into the desolation of the West Side Industrial District. The buildings here were skeletons, broken, windows staring like dead eyes, graffiti covering the brick walls like scars. Jerome swerved off the main road and bounced over a gravel path leading to the old textile factory. It was a massive, rotting structure of corrugated metal and crumbling concrete. He slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt in the shadows. He jumped out and ripped the back door open. "Get out!" he ordered, grabbing her arm. "No!" Layla cried, kicking at him. "I want to go home." He dragged her out his grip, bruising her skin. He did not care about her comfort. He did not care about her fear. He only cared about the leverage she provided. He marched her toward the dark maw of the warehouse entrance, pushing her through the rusted doors into the gloom. Inside it smelled of mold and oil and abandonment. "Sit down," he barked, pointing to an old wooden crate in the center of the vast empty floor. "Stay there and do not move. If you run. The bad men will come and they will hurt us both. Do you understand?" Layla sat. She hugged her knees to her chest, shaking uncontrollably. She looked at her father, pacing back and forth, muttering to himself, checking his phone, checking his gun. She saw the truth. Then the truth. I had tried to protect her from. She saw that her father was not a hero. He was not a victim. He was the villain of her story, and she was nothing more than a bargaining chip in a game she did not understand. She closed her eyes and prayed that I was coming. She prayed that her grandfather, the mechanic, the old man her parents had laughed at, was exactly who he said he was, because she knew now that he was the only one who could save her from the monster in the room. The silence of my victory did not last long, because a man who owes $3 million to the cartel does not sleep, and neither do his creditors. Jerome was released on bail 20 times. 4 hours after his arrest, I had expected this. I knew the legal system moved slow, but the underworld moved fast. I sat in my fortified living room, cleaning my glasses, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I did not know that while I was drinking my coffee, my son was being dragged into a van 3 blocks from the county jail. I learned the details later from the police report and the bloodstains found in the back of a transmission shop in Decatur. The Rojas brothers were not interested in excuses. They tied Jerome to a chair. They did not ask him for the money again. They simply took his left hand, splayed it on a workbench, and used a pair of rusty garden shears to remove his pinky finger. The scream must have been deafening, but in that soundproofed room, no one heard a thing. They cauterized the wound with a soldering iron and woke him up with a bucket of ice water. The leader, a man named Carlos, leaned close to Jerome's sweating gray face and whispered, "You have 6 hours. Bring us the girl or bring us the money if you don't. The next thing we take is your eyes." Jerome broke completely in that moment, the last shred of humanity he possessed. The tiny spark of decency that might have existed somewhere deep inside him was extinguished by pain and terror. He was no longer a father. He was no longer a son. He was a desperate animal willing to do anything to survive. He looked at his mutilated hand wrapped in a dirty rag, and he made a decision that would damn him for eternity. He decided that his daughter's life was a fair price to pay for his own. He stumbled out of the shop blinded by pain and fear. He stole a car from a gas station parking lot. A beat-up sedan, left running by a careless driver. He drove toward the private school in Buckhead, his eyes wild, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was not thinking about the trauma he was about to inflict. He was only thinking about the clock ticking down in his head. I was at home reviewing security protocols when my phone buzzed. It was an alert. From the tracking app I had secretly installed on Layla's phone months ago disguised as a game. Usually she was in the geography wing at this hour, but the dot was moving. It was moving fast across the parking lot toward the main road. My stomach dropped. I switched to the school's security feed, which I had access to. Thanks to a substantial donation I made the previous year, I saw the grainy footage of a man in a hoodie limping toward the playground fence. It was recess. The children were running around laughing, oblivious to the monster lurking at the perimeter. I saw Layla. She was playing near the swings. The man whistled. She looked up. She recognized him even through the hoodie and the distance. She ran toward the fence, smiling. She thought it was her daddy coming to surprise her. She did not see the blood on his shirt. She did not see the madness in his eyes. Jerome reached over the low fence. He did not hug her. He grabbed her by the collar of her uniform and hoisted her over the metal bars like a sack of flour. Layla started to kick. She started to scream. I watched in helpless horror as other teachers turned and started running, but they were too far away. Jerome threw her into the back seat of the stolen sedan and sped off, tires smoking, leaving a cloud of dust and a group of terrified children in his wake. My phone rang seconds later. It was an unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. I did not say hello. I just listened. Dad. Jerome's voice was unrecognizable. It was a wet, gurgling sound, high-pitched with hysteria. I have her. I have Layla. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute. It was the absence of all emotion, except one focus. Where are you, Jerome? I asked, my voice steady. It does not matter, he screamed. Bring the money, $3 million. Cash, I know you have it in that basement. Bring it to the old textile factory on the west side. You know the one with the collapsed roof. I know it, I said. Come alone, he rasped. If I see a cop, if I see a drone, I will kill her. I swear to God, Dad, I will kill her. I have nothing left to lose. Look at what they did to me. I heard Layla crying in the background. Grandpa, please help me. Daddy is hurting me. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone. The silence of the house pressed in on me, screaming in my ears. A normal man would call 911. A normal man would trust the authorities to handle a kidnapping and hostage situation. But I knew the police. I knew they would set up a perimeter, they would bring in negotiators, they would wait. And in that time, Jerome would snap, or the cartel would arrive and burn the place down with my granddaughter inside. I could not risk it. Jerome was right about one thing. I had nothing left to lose either, except Layla. I walked to the basement. I did not go to the computer terminal. This time, I went to the back wall behind the server racks. I pressed a panel and a hidden compartment clicked open. Inside was a footlocker, green steel dented and scratched. It was a relic from a life I had left behind 40 years ago, a life before logistics, before Atlanta, before I was Enoch the mechanic. I opened the locker. The smell of gun oil and old canvas wafted up. I took out the vest. It was heavy, lined with ceramic plates. I put it on, tightening the Velcro straps over my flannel shirt. It felt familiar, like a second skin. I took out the boots. Heavy combat boots with steel toes, and laced them up tight. Then I reached for the weapon. It was not a hunting rifle. It was a Benelli M4 tactical shotgun, matte black with a pistol grip. I had modified it myself years ago. I loaded the tube with slugs, heavy lead rounds that could punch through an engine block. I pumped the action. The sound was a mechanical promise of violence. I grabbed a sidearm, a 1911 pistol, and tucked it into the holster on the vest. I grabbed a knife, a 6-inch blade with a serrated edge, and strapped it to my boot. I looked at my reflection in the dark monitor of the server rack. I did not see an old man. I did not see a victim. I saw a soldier who had been called back to war. I saw the man who had survived jungles and deserts, the man who had built an empire with his bare hands and who was now going to dismantle his greatest mistake. I walked out of the house. I did not take the truck. I took the black sedan I kept in the back of the garage, the one with the reinforced chassis and the bulletproof glass. I drove toward the west side, toward the decaying industrial district where the city dumped its trash and its secrets. I drove with one hand on the wheel and one hand on the shotgun. I was not angry anymore. Anger is a distraction. I was cold. I was precise. I was a machine built for one purpose: to retrieve my granddaughter and to end this nightmare once and for all. Jerome thought he was dealing with his father. He thought he was dealing with a businessman. He forgot that before I was any of those things, I was a man who knew how to clear a room. He had invited the devil to dinner, and he was about to find out that the devil brought his own cutlery. I pulled up to the perimeter of the old factory. I killed the headlights. I rolled the car into the shadows of a collapsed wall. I got out, checking my gear. The air smelled of rust and rain. I moved toward the main building, silent as a shadow, my eyes adjusting to the gloom. I heard a scream from inside. It was Layla. I did not run. Running makes noise. I moved with a predator's grace toward the entrance. I racked the shotgun one last time. "I am coming, Layla," I whispered into the darkness. "And God help anyone who stands in my way." I stepped into the vast open space of the factory floor. The air was thick with the smell of stagnant water and old grease. Shafts of moonlight cut through the holes in the rotting roof, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like ghosts. In the center of the room, illuminated by a single battery-powered work light, stood my son. Jerome looked like a man whose soul had been burned out of him. His face was gaunt and gray. His clothes were stained with sweat and grime. His left hand was wrapped in a bloody rag, the missing finger a stark reminder of the debt he owed. In his right hand, he held a cheap pistol. It was shaking violently. He had his arm wrapped around Layla's neck. My granddaughter was not screaming anymore. She had gone past terror into a state of shock. Her eyes were wide and vacant, staring at nothing. Her school uniform was torn at the shoulder. Seeing her like that ignited a cold fury in my gut that I had not felt since my days in the jungle 40 years ago. "Stay back!" Jerome screamed. His voice cracked, echoing off the metal walls. "Did you bring it? Did you bring the money?" I stopped 10 yards away. I held the Benelli shotgun across my chest. I did not aim it yet. I wanted him to see my eyes. I wanted him to see that the father who had paid his bail and fixed his cars was gone. "I am here, Jerome," I said. My voice was low and steady. "Let the girl go, Earl. This is between you and me." "It is not between us," he shrieked. "It is between me and the knife. They are coming, Dad. They are coming to finish the job. Give me the bag. Throw it over here." He pressed the muzzle of the gun against Layla's temple. She whimpered a small broken sound that tore at my heart. "I do not have the money, Jerome," I said. "I did not go to the bank. I came for her." Jerome's eyes bulged. "What? You came empty-handed. You are lying. You have millions. You have that secret room. You have the empire. I have assets I corrected. I do not carry $3 million in cash, and even if I did, I would not give it to a man holding a gun to a child." He started to hyperventilate. "You killed me," he sobbed. "You killed us all." Suddenly a shadow detached itself from a rusty pillar to my left. It was Courtney. She looked like a wraith. Her designer clothes were ruined. Her hair was matted. She held a long screwdriver in her hand, gripping it like a dagger. "He is lying, Jerome," she hissed, stepping into the light. "He has it. He always has a plan. Search him. Kill him and search him." "Courtney," I said, not taking my eyes off Jerome, "you really want to do this? You want to add accessory to murder to your list of failures?" "Shut up," she screamed. She lunged toward me, her eyes manic with greed. "Just give us the money, you selfish old monster. We deserve it. We suffered for it." Jerome tightened his grip on Layla. "Do it, Courtney," he yelled. "Get his keys. Check the car." The situation was deteriorating fast. Jerome was unstable. Courtney was desperate, and Layla was in the middle of the crossfire. I shifted my weight. I needed to separate them. I needed a clear line of fire. "Jerome!" I shouted, my voice booming through the factory. "Look at yourself. You are using your own daughter as a human shield. Is this the legacy you want? Is this who you are?" "I am a dead man," Jerome wailed. "I am already dead." "Then die like a man," I roared. "Not like a coward." Jerome flinched. For a second, the gun wavered. That was all I needed. But before I could move, Courtney screamed and charged at me, the screwdriver raised high, aiming for my neck. I dropped the shotgun to its sling, letting it hang across my chest, because I did not need a weapon to handle a woman who thought reality TV was combat training. Courtney lunged at me with the screwdriver, aiming for my throat, but she moved with the sloppy desperation of an amateur. I stepped inside her guard with a fluidity that belied my age. I clamped my left hand around her wrist, stopping her momentum cold. She gasped, looking into my eyes and seeing not a victim but a wall of iron. I applied pressure to the radial nerve in her forearm. She screamed, and her fingers spasmed involuntarily, dropping the screwdriver to the concrete floor with a metallic clang. I did not strike her. I simply used her own forward energy against her. I spun her around and shoved her hard toward a pile of rotting wooden pallets. She crashed into the debris and crumpled to the floor, wheezing, holding her wrist. The fight instantly drained out of her. She looked up at me with terror, finally realizing that the old mechanic was something far more dangerous than she had ever calculated. I turned back to Jerome, hoping the display of force would shock him into submission, but it only pushed him further over the edge. He watched his wife fall, and his panic spiked into madness. He jammed the pistol harder into Layla's skin, making her cry out in pain. He backed away until he hit the corrugated metal wall, dragging my granddaughter with him, using her small body as a shield against the man who had just dismantled his wife in 3 seconds. "Stop!" he shrieked, his eyes rolling back in his head. "Do not take another step, or I will do it. I swear to God, Dad, I will do it. I have nothing left. Do you hear me? Nothing." Jerome was vibrating with a lethal cocktail of adrenaline and terror, pressing the gun harder into Layla's cheek, but I did not raise my hands. Instead, I reached into the inside pocket of my tactical vest. He screamed at me to stop thinking I was reaching for a weapon or a checkbook, but I pulled out a folded piece of paper that was yellowed with age and threw it on the concrete floor between us. "Read it, Jerome," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the wind howling through the broken roof. He looked down and saw the letterhead of a paternity testing clinic dated the week he was born. "You are not my son. I said your mother had an affair with a man who left town before you took your first breath, and I knew it the moment I saw you. But I signed the birth certificate anyway. I gave you my name, I raised you, I paid for your mistakes, and I loved you when your own blood father abandoned you." Jerome stared at me, his mouth opening as the gun lowered an inch. "You killed the only father you ever had," I whispered, "and you did it for money you were never entitled to." The reality of his life crashed down on him, realizing he was not a victim or a prince denied his crown, but a charity case who had bitten the hand that fed him. He let out a sound that was not human. It was the sound of a soul breaking. He dropped the gun and it clattered on the floor as he fell to his knees, covering his face with his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Layla ran to me, burying her face in my vest, just as sirens wailed outside, and red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the walls. The police were here, but the war was already over. Jerome had surrendered not to the law, but to the truth. 1 year has passed since the sirens faded from that cold warehouse floor. I am standing on the porch of a sprawling ranch in the rolling hills of Tennessee. This land has been in my portfolio for 20 years, hidden under a shell corporation, but now it is simply home. The air smells of sweet hay and pine needles instead of city smog and betrayal. I look out at the paddock where the grass stretches to the horizon. A black stallion gallops across the field dust, kicking up in the golden hour light. Riding him is Layla. She is laughing. It is a genuine sound, a melody I thought was lost forever in the shadow of her father's gun. She waves at me, her smile bright and unburdened by the sins of the people who created her. She does not know the full extent of my empire yet, but she knows she is safe. She knows she is loved not for what she can provide as leverage, but for who she is. I take a sip of iced tea and lean back in my rocking chair. The silence here is different. It is not the silence of secrets kept in a dark room. It is the silence of a life finally lived on its own terms. We are far away from Atlanta, far away from the noise, and for the first time in a long time, I feel the heavy weight of the armor I wore for 40 years finally lifting off my shoulders. Far away from the open skies of Tennessee, the reality for my son and his wife is the cold gray of concrete walls. Courtney is serving her time in a federal facility 2 states over, where the influencer who lived for likes and engagement now lives for survival. I heard from Katz that her vanity made her a target immediately, and the other inmates do not care about her follower count or her fashion sense. She spends her days scrubbing floors, and her nights crying into a thin mattress, terrified of the women she used to look down on. Jerome is in a maximum security unit for his own protection, but fear is his constant cellmate because he knows the cartel has a long reach and debts do not disappear just because you are behind bars. He spends every waking hour writing letters, filling pages with frantic scrawls, begging for forgiveness, claiming he was manipulated, claiming he has found religion. He sends them to me like prayers to a God he stopped believing in long ago, hoping for a miracle that is never going to come. Every Friday, the mail carrier delivers a bundle of those letters from the penitentiary, but I do not cut them open. I do not look for a glimmer of redemption in his handwriting. I simply walk to the stone fire pit in the backyard and toss them into the flames one by one, watching the paper curl and blacken as my weekly ritual of cleansing. It is the final closing of a door that should have been shut years ago. This afternoon, I sat at my desk and signed the final addendum to the Freeman Trust, ensuring Layla will inherit the logistics empire, the real estate, and the fortune, but not until she is 30 years old. Until then, she must complete 100 hours of community service every single year, because she will learn that wealth is a tool for building, not a weapon for taking. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the Tennessee hills in gold and violet, I take a deep breath of clean air, finally understanding the truth that eluded me for so long. Blood does not make you family, loyalty makes you family, and the peace I feel right now is the only inheritance that truly matters. As I sit here watching Layla learn to trust again, I realize that the greatest tragedy of my son's life was not his debt or his prison sentence. It was his blindness. He spent his entire life looking at my grease-stained hands and seeing a failure. Instead of seeing the foundation upon which he stood, he chased the illusion of wealth while I was trying to give him the reality of character. Greed is a fire that consumes the vessel that holds it, and Jerome and Courtney burned themselves to ash, trying to keep warm by its light. I learned that you can give a child everything, education, opportunity, and love, but you cannot give them a conscience that is something they must forge for themselves. And when they choose to trade their integrity for a quick payout, they do not just lose the money. They lose their place at the table of humanity. Blood may connect us biologically, but loyalty and respect are the only things that keep us connected spiritually. I do not regret cutting them off because in doing so I saved the only innocent part of this family from drowning in their toxicity. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their children face the consequences of their own actions, because a lesson learned in pain is a lesson that is never forgotten. And though my heart still aches for the son I thought I had, I am at peace, knowing I protected the future that really matters. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments if you would have forgiven Jerome or if you would have done exactly what I did. I want to hear your thoughts.